The letter arrived 3 hours before the scandal did. Evelyn Hartwell was standing beside a tall window in the Hartwell townhouse on Grosvenor Square when the footman placed the cream-colored envelope upon the silver tray before her. The seal belonged to Lady Whitmore, one of the most influential hostesses in London. Under ordinary circumstances, receiving such an invitation would have delighted any unmarried woman. Tonight, however, Evelyn felt only a familiar heaviness settle across her shoulders. She already knew who the invitation was truly for. Not her. Never her. Across the drawing room, her younger sister laughed brightly at something their mother had said. Celeste Hartwell seemed to carry sunshine with her wherever she went. Men gravitated toward her. Women praised her beauty. Mothers introduced eligible sons the moment she entered a room. At 22, Celeste had become one of the most sought-after young ladies in London. At 27, Evelyn had become something else entirely. Useful, dependable, forgettable. Open it, Lady Beatrice urged excitedly. Perhaps Lord Ashcombe has finally found the courage to call. Celeste accepted the letter dramatically and broke the seal. Her blue eyes sparkled as she scanned the contents. It is Lady Whitmore's autumn ball. She clapped her hands together. And the Duke of Ravenshire is expected to attend. The room immediately erupted with interest. Even Lord Malcolm Hartwell lowered his newspaper. Nathaniel Blackthorne? He asked. The Duke. The very one, Celeste replied. Lady Whitmore says nearly every important family in England will be there. Evelyn turned her gaze toward the rain-streaked window. The name meant little to her personally, though she knew the reputation attached to it. Nathaniel Blackthorne, Duke of Ravenshire. 34 years old. Powerful. Wealthy. Reserved. The sort of man society watched even when he was standing perfectly still. You must wear the sapphire gown, Lady Beatrice said. The blue one makes your eyes look extraordinary. Celeste smiled. I was thinking the same thing. No one asked what Evelyn intended to wear. No one ever did. She folded her hands calmly before her and watched droplets slide down the glass. Outside, autumn rain softened the streets of London beneath a gray sky. Inside, she already knew exactly how the evening would unfold. Celeste would shine. Admirers would gather. Their parents would boast. Evelyn would stand politely at the edge of conversations and make certain nothing embarrassed the family. It was a role she had perfected years ago. You will attend as well, of course? Lady Beatrice said suddenly. Evelyn blinked in surprise. If you wish it. Naturally. Every respectable daughter must appear. Lady Beatrice adjusted the lace at her sleeve. Though please try not to spend the entire evening hiding beside the refreshments. Celeste laughed. Mother, Evelyn does not hide. She simply enjoys observing humanity. Observing is all very well, Lady Beatrice replied. But people might think you dislike society. Evelyn offered a small smile. That would be unfortunate. The conversation moved on. It always did. She remained by the window while plans formed around her. Fabric selections, jewel choices, carriage arrangements. Every detail revolved around Celeste's future. Evelyn had long ago stopped resenting it. Resentment required hope. Hope required expectation. Both had quietly faded years earlier. The evening of Lady Whitmore's ball arrived beneath a sky scattered with stars. Hundreds of lanterns illuminated the grand townhouse. Carriages lined the street for nearly a quarter-mile. Footmen hurried across polished stone steps. Music drifted from open windows. London society had gathered in full force. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Gold candlelight reflected from mirrors that stretched nearly to the ceiling. Silk gowns shimmered in every direction. Laughter blended with orchestral music until the room seemed alive with movement. Evelyn stepped inside and immediately felt herself disappear. It was a peculiar talent. She possessed neither extraordinary beauty nor striking plainness. She occupied the comfortable middle ground where people rarely looked twice. Her chestnut hair had been arranged elegantly. Her emerald gown suited her well. Yet within minutes attention drifted elsewhere, usually towards Celeste. Tonight proved no different. Look at them, whispered a young woman nearby. 3 gentlemen already. 4. her companion corrected. Lord Ashcombe just joined them. Evelyn followed the direction of their gazes. Celeste stood surrounded by admirers. Her laughter floated effortlessly across the room. She looked radiant beneath the chandeliers, like someone born for this world. Evelyn genuinely wanted her sister to be happy. That was the strange part. She always had, despite the comparisons, despite the dismissive remarks, despite spending years hearing relatives wonder why one sister attracted attention while the other did not. None of it had ever been Celeste's fault. At least that was what Evelyn told herself. Miss Hartwell. She turned to find Lady Agnes Winthrop approaching. A widow with sharp eyes and sharper opinions. How lovely to see you. Likewise, Lady Agnes. You look elegant this evening. The older woman paused briefly. Though your sister is certainly attracting attention. There it was. The inevitable comparison. Evelyn smiled graciously. She always does. Lady Agnes studied her for a moment. You are remarkably kind about it. About what? Being overlooked. Evelyn laughed softly. One becomes accustomed to many things with sufficient practice. The older woman seemed about to reply when a sudden hush swept through the ballroom. Conversations faltered. Musicians lost their rhythm for a heartbeat. Every gaze shifted toward the entrance. Evelyn did not need anyone to announce the reason. She could feel it ripple through the crowd. Then the butler's voice carried clearly across the room. His Grace, Nathaniel Blackthorne, Duke of Ravenshire. A tall figure entered beneath the archway. The effect was immediate. Mothers straightened. Daughters adjusted gloves and smiles. Gentlemen stepped aside. Nathaniel Blackthorne moved through the ballroom with controlled confidence. Dark hair, gray eyes, impeccable evening attire. Nothing about him appeared theatrical. Yet attention followed him effortlessly. He acknowledged greetings with brief nods. Nothing more. Good heavens, Lady Agnes murmured. The man looks even more intimidating in person. Evelyn watched him only briefly before looking away. She had never understood the fascination surrounding powerful men. Wealth and titles were useful. They were not magical. Besides, the Duke would never notice someone like her. Moments later, she discovered she was entirely correct. Within 10 minutes, Lady Beatrice had maneuvered Celeste into the Duke's path. Evelyn observed from a distance as introductions were made. Celeste's smile brightened. The Duke listened politely. They exchanged several words. Nothing remarkable occurred. Yet excitement spread through nearby groups almost instantly. Rumors required very little encouragement. Did you see that? Whispered one woman. He spoke to her for nearly 2 minutes. Perhaps he is interested. Would that not be a match? Evelyn quietly excused herself and moved toward the terrace doors. Fresh air felt preferable to speculation. The night beyond the ballroom was cool and peaceful. Lanterns illuminated the garden paths. The distant sounds of music drifted through open doors. For several blessed minutes she stood alone. Then footsteps approached behind her. There you are. Celeste's voice carried irritation. Evelyn turned. Is something wrong? Lord Ashcombe is impossible. I thought you liked him. I like being admired. Celeste folded her arms. There is a difference. Evelyn smiled despite herself. A significant difference, apparently. Celeste glanced back toward the ballroom. Did you see me speaking with the Duke? Most of London probably saw. Her sister grinned. What did you think? He seemed polite. Only polite? Would you prefer I compose poetry? Celeste laughed. You always say the funniest things when you do not realize it. A brief silence settled between them. Then Celeste's expression shifted. Something thoughtful flickered behind her eyes. Do you ever wish things had turned out differently? Evelyn frowned slightly. Differently how? For you. The words landed unexpectedly. You are beautiful, Evelyn. You are intelligent. Sometimes I think society simply made a mistake. Evelyn looked away toward the gardens. Society rarely admits mistakes. I mean it. Celeste stepped closer. You deserve happiness too. For a moment warmth touched Evelyn's heart. Then she noticed movement behind her sister. 2 young gentlemen approaching. Celeste had already seen them. The tenderness vanished instantly. "I must go." Her sister smiled brightly. "Do not hide out here all evening." She disappeared before Evelyn could answer. The warmth faded as quickly as it had arrived. Near midnight, the atmosphere inside Lady Whitmore's ballroom shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough for most guests to notice. Yet Evelyn sensed it almost immediately. Whispers began circulating between groups. Small clusters formed near the edges of the room. Faces turned toward the entrance hall. Confusion spread. A footman hurried past. Then another. "Something has happened," Lady Agnes said quietly. Evelyn felt a strange unease settle in her stomach. Across the ballroom, she searched for Celeste. Her sister was nowhere in sight. Neither were Lord Ashcombe or several other guests who had been speaking with her earlier. 5 minutes later, Lord Malcolm appeared. His complexion had turned pale. Lady Beatrice stood beside him looking equally shaken. Evelyn crossed the room at once. "Father!" He looked at her as though only just realizing she was there. "Where is Celeste?" Evelyn asked. Neither parent answered immediately. Lady Beatrice gripped her husband's arm. "Not here," she whispered urgently. "We cannot discuss this here." A chill moved through Evelyn. What happened? Lord Malcolm swallowed hard. For the first time in years, he appeared frightened. Truly frightened. Then he leaned closer and spoke the words that would change everything. "Your sister has disappeared." The music continued playing. Guests continued dancing. Laughter still echoed beneath the chandeliers. Yet suddenly the entire ballroom felt different. Like a beautiful painting with a crack spreading silently through the center. And somewhere beyond those walls, hidden in the darkness of London, a scandal had already begun. The journey home felt longer than it should have. Rain tapped softly against the carriage windows while London drifted past in blurred lantern light. Across from Evelyn, Lady Beatrice sat rigidly upright, clutching her gloves so tightly that the kid leather had begun to crease. Lord Malcolm stared out the opposite window without speaking. The silence inside the carriage felt heavier than any argument. Evelyn waited as long as she could. Finally, she spoke. "Where is Celeste?" Neither parent answered immediately. Her father closed his eyes briefly. "We do not know." The words settled coldly in the carriage. Evelyn blinked. "You do not know?" She left the ballroom. Lady Beatrice's voice trembled. She was seen entering a private sitting room. Evelyn frowned. "With whom?" Another silence. This one lasted longer. "The Duke of Ravenshire." Evelyn stared at them. "That is impossible." "Is it?" Lady Beatrice snapped. Half the ballroom saw them speaking. "Speaking is not a scandal." "No." Her mother's expression darkened. "Disappearing afterward is." The carriage rolled over uneven cobblestones. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "Has anyone spoken to His Grace?" The Duke left shortly after the rumors began. Lord Malcolm finally looked at her. His face appeared years older than it had only hours earlier. Celeste was nowhere to be found. Evelyn tried to make sense of it. None of it sounded like Celeste. Flirtatious, perhaps. Reckless on occasion. But not foolish enough to destroy her own reputation. There must be some mistake. Lady Beatrice laughed bitterly. "Tell that to London." By the time they arrived home, servants were already awake and waiting. News traveled quickly among aristocratic households. Faster than carriages. Faster than reason. The butler opened the front doors with unusual haste. A footman avoided meeting anyone's eyes. Somewhere upstairs, a maid began crying quietly. Evelyn climbed the staircase feeling as though she had entered a different house than the one she had left earlier that evening. The scandal had not even been confirmed. Yet already it had started changing everything. She slept little. Just before dawn, she finally drifted into a restless sleep. Less than 2 hours later, frantic knocking woke her. "Miss Evelyn." Martha's voice came through the door. "Miss Evelyn, please wake up." Evelyn sat upright immediately. "What is it?" "Your father requests you downstairs." She dressed quickly and descended to the breakfast room. The atmosphere waiting below was worse than she expected. Newspapers lay scattered across the table. Several had already been opened. Lady Beatrice appeared pale. Lord Malcolm looked furious. A fresh letter sat unopened beside his hand. Evelyn approached cautiously. "Has Celeste returned?" No one answered. Her heart sank. Then Lord Malcolm slid a newspaper across the table. The headline was not large. It did not need to be. Society gossip rarely did. Rumors concerning a distinguished duke and a prominent young lady. Evelyn read the short column. By the end, her pulse had quickened. Nothing was stated directly. Every sentence relied upon implication. Yet the message was unmistakable. A young woman from a respected family had apparently compromised herself while seeking the attention of one of England's most powerful noblemen. No names appeared. Names were unnecessary. Anyone who attended Lady Whitmore's ball would understand immediately. "This is absurd," Evelyn said. "There is no proof of anything. Proof does not matter." Lady Beatrice pressed a hand against her forehead. "Perception matters." Lord Malcolm opened the letter beside him. His jaw tightened further as he scanned the contents. "Another one." "From whom?" Lady Beatrice asked. "The Ashcombe family." He tossed the letter onto the table. "Lord Ashcombe will not be calling again." The room fell silent. Evelyn felt genuine sorrow for Celeste. Whatever mistakes her sister had made, the punishment had already begun. Then the breakfast room door burst open. Everyone turned. Celeste stood in the doorway. For one glorious second, relief flooded Evelyn's chest. Then she saw her sister's face. Celeste looked exhausted. Her eyes were red. Her elegant hairstyle had partially collapsed. She seemed less like the confident young woman from the ballroom and more like a frightened girl. Lady Beatrice rushed toward her. "Where have you been?" "Mother, please. Do you understand what has happened?" "I understand perfectly." Celeste's voice cracked. "I have heard enough whispers already." Lord Malcolm rose slowly. "Answer the question." Celeste looked away. "I spent the night at Lady Penrose's house. Without informing anyone? I panicked." "Why?" She hesitated. Evelyn noticed it immediately. So did everyone else. "Celeste." Their father's voice hardened. "Why?" Her sister swallowed. "Because I knew how it would look." The room remained quiet. "Did you meet privately with the Duke?" Lord Malcolm asked. "Briefly." Lady Beatrice gasped. "Nothing happened." Celeste spoke quickly. "Nothing improper. I swear it." Evelyn believed her. At least she wanted to. Yet uncertainty had entered the room and refused to leave. The next several hours passed in tense discussions. Letters arrived continuously. Visitors called. Servants whispered. Rumors multiplied faster than anyone could contain them. By afternoon, a new problem emerged. One far more dangerous than gossip. The Duke of Ravenshire had made no public statement. Not a denial. Not a clarification. Nothing. Society interpreted silence however it pleased. Usually in the most dramatic way possible. 3 days passed. The situation worsened. Then the summons arrived. Lord Malcolm read it twice before lowering the paper. His face drained of color. "What is it?" Lady Beatrice asked. "The Dowager Countess of Ravenshire." "The Duke's aunt." "Yes." He looked toward the window. "She requests a private audience." No one needed to ask why. The meeting took place the following afternoon. The Hartwell family traveled to a smaller London residence belonging to the Ravenshire family. Not the Duke's primary house. That fact alone worried Evelyn. Powerful people often chose smaller rooms when discussing unpleasant matters. The drawing room felt elegant but cold. A fire burned quietly. Tea sat untouched upon a polished table. The Dowager Countess entered exactly on time. She greeted them politely. Nothing more. Then she sat. "I shall speak plainly." Her voice remained calm. "This situation has become unacceptable." Lady Beatrice immediately began apologizing. The Countess lifted one hand. Silence followed. "I am not interested in apologies." Her gaze shifted between them. "I am interested in solutions." Lord Malcolm leaned forward. "Naturally. The Duke refuses to discuss the matter publicly. That is unfortunate." "No." The Countess smiled faintly. "That is Nathaniel." Evelyn listened quietly. Something about the older woman's tone caught her attention. There was affection there. Also exasperation. His Grace maintains that no scandal exists, the Countess continued. Unfortunately, society has reached a different conclusion. Then perhaps he might issue a statement. Lady Beatrice suggested hopefully. He will not. The answer came instantly. Nathaniel does not explain himself to London. Nobody spoke. The Countess folded her hands. However, there may be another approach. Evelyn suddenly had a terrible feeling. The older woman's gaze settled upon her. Miss Hartwell. Every instinct told Evelyn to be concerned. Yes. Would you accompany me for a walk? 20 minutes later they stood alone in a small winter garden behind the house. Autumn leaves drifted across stone paths. A fountain murmured softly nearby. The Countess stopped beside a marble bench. Tell me about your sister. The question surprised Evelyn. Celeste. Yes. She is kind. The answer emerged automatically. Beautiful. Intelligent. Occasionally impulsive. And you? Evelyn blinked. I beg your pardon? Tell me about yourself. The conversation felt strange. There is little to tell. I doubt that. Evelyn smiled politely. I am 27 years old. I read too much. I enjoy quiet mornings. I have no remarkable accomplishments. The Countess studied her. Interesting. What is? Most people would have spent the last 5 minutes discussing their strengths. Evelyn looked away. Most people are wiser than I am. The older woman laughed softly. No. Most people are less honest. They resumed walking. Finally the Countess stopped again. Miss Hartwell, your family requires help. Evelyn stiffened. I know. And unfortunately, your sister is no longer the person best positioned to obtain it. The meaning landed immediately. No. Hear me out. You wish me to speak with the Duke? Yes. Evelyn stared at her. Why? Because Nathaniel dislikes manipulation. Most people do. You would be surprised. A faint smile touched the Countess's lips. He also dislikes dishonesty, flattery, desperation, performance. Evelyn folded her arms. Then London must exhaust him. Frequently, the Countess stepped closer. Your family intends to send someone to Ravenshire House. Someone must persuade the Duke to help contain this scandal. Evelyn already knew what was coming. They will choose Celeste. No. The Countess shook her head. They will choose you. That evening confirmed her prediction. The moment the Hartwells returned home, discussions began. Arguments followed. By nightfall the decision had been made. Not by Evelyn. Certainly not for Evelyn. Lord Malcolm summoned her to his study shortly before dinner. Lady Beatrice and Celeste were already there. The atmosphere felt strangely formal. Evelyn remained standing. You wish to see me? Her father nodded. A difficult matter requires attention. She waited. You will call upon the Duke of Ravenshire tomorrow. The words struck exactly as she expected. They still hurt. Why me? Lord Malcolm looked uncomfortable. Lady Beatrice answered instead. Because it must be someone respectable. Evelyn almost laughed. Not because the statement was amusing. Because it revealed everything. Celeste sat quietly with lowered eyes. You mean someone who has not been associated with the scandal? Evelyn. Her mother's tone sharpened. This affects the entire family. I am aware. Then you understand your duty. Duty. The word appeared whenever sacrifices were required. Curiously, it never seemed directed towards Celeste. Evelyn looked at her sister. For a brief moment, guilt flashed across the younger woman's face. Then it disappeared. What exactly am I expected to do? She asked. Lord Malcolm exhaled slowly. Ask the Duke for discretion. And if he refuses? No one answered. That silence provided all the information she needed. Later that evening, Martha helped prepare clothing for the visit. Nothing extravagant. Nothing memorable. Respectable. Modest. Safe. As though Evelyn were being packaged for delivery. She sat before her vanity while the maid folded gloves. It isn't fair, Martha muttered. Evelyn smiled faintly. Fairness rarely attends London society. You should not be fixing someone else's mistakes. Perhaps not. Then why go? Evelyn stared at her reflection. The answer arrived quietly. Because if I do not, Celeste will go herself. Martha lowered her gaze. Neither woman spoke for several seconds. Finally, Evelyn rose and moved toward the window. Outside, darkness covered the city. Somewhere beyond those streets stood Ravenshire House. Somewhere beyond those walls waited a man powerful enough to destroy or save her family's future with a single decision. Tomorrow she would stand before him. Not as a daughter. Not as a sister. Not even as herself. She would go as an offering sent to repair damage she had never caused. And for reasons she could not yet explain, that thought frightened her far less than the possibility that the Duke might already know exactly why she had been chosen. Ravenshire House stood on one of the most prestigious streets in London, though Evelyn suspected it would have commanded attention even if it had been built in the middle of an empty field. The residence occupied nearly an entire block. Tall stone columns framed the entrance. Massive windows reflected the pale autumn sunlight. Everything about the estate suggested permanence. Wealth could be lost. Fashion could change. Families could rise and fall. Ravenshire House appeared built to outlast all of them. The carriage rolled to a stop. Evelyn looked through the window and felt an unwelcome flutter of nerves. Beside her, Lord Malcolm adjusted his cuffs. Remember why you are here. She kept her eyes on the house. I assure you, father, forgetting would be difficult. He did not appear amused. This is important. I am aware. The future of this family may depend upon this conversation. Evelyn nearly pointed out that the future of the family seemed to depend upon her only when something unpleasant needed doing. Instead, she simply nodded. A footman opened the carriage door. Moments later she climbed the front steps alone. Her father would not accompany her. That had already been decided. The request for a private audience had specified Evelyn by name. Not Lord Malcolm. Not Lady Beatrice. Not even Celeste. Just Evelyn. The realization unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The enormous doors opened before she could gather another thought. A butler greeted her with flawless composure. Miss Hartwell, His Grace is expecting you. That did not improve her nerves. She followed the servant through hallways lined with portraits and polished marble floors. Every detail reflected careful taste rather than excessive display. The house felt less like a monument to wealth and more like a place managed by someone who disliked waste. Eventually the butler stopped outside a pair of oak doors. His Grace will see you now. The doors opened. Evelyn stepped inside. The study was larger than most drawing rooms. Tall bookshelves lined the walls. Sunlight filtered through long windows overlooking a private garden. A fire burned quietly despite the mild afternoon. Behind a broad desk stood Nathaniel Blackthorne. For a brief moment neither of them spoke. Evelyn had only seen him from a distance before. Up close, the impression was stronger. Not because he was exceptionally handsome, though many women would certainly claim he was. It was something else. Control. The Duke carried himself like a man entirely accustomed to making decisions and living with the consequences. His gray eyes settled on her. Calm. Observant. Difficult to read. Miss Hartwell. His voice was deep and even. Thank you for coming. She dipped into a curtsy. Your Grace. He gestured toward a chair near the fireplace. Please sit. Evelyn obeyed. Nathaniel remained standing for a moment before taking the chair opposite her. The silence stretched. Not awkward. Deliberate. She felt as though he were studying her. Finally he spoke. Would you care for tea? The question caught her off guard. No, thank you. Very well. Another pause. Then the Duke leaned back slightly. I imagine your family sent you here with a purpose. Direct. Extremely direct. Evelyn appreciated that. They did. And what purpose would that be? There was no point pretending. To ask for your discretion regarding the rumors. His expression remained unchanged. The rumors. Yes. Interesting. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. I realize the situation is unfortunate. Do you? She blinked. I believe so. Nathaniel regarded her steadily. Then perhaps you can explain something to me. I shall try. Why are you here? She frowned slightly. I just told you. No. His gaze never left hers. You told me why your family sent you. The distinction landed immediately. Evelyn looked away briefly. I suppose I am here because they asked me to come. And if they had not? Then I would be at home reading a novel. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. An honest answer. You did ask. Most people answer the question they wish had been asked. Evelyn found herself unexpectedly relaxing. Just a little. I have noticed that as well. Nathaniel studied her for several seconds. Then he rose and crossed toward the windows. Tell me something, Miss Hartwell. Of course. Do you believe your sister compromised herself? The question arrived so suddenly that she nearly forgot to breathe. She stared at him. No. He turned. You answered very quickly. Because I do not need time to decide. His expression sharpened with interest. You are certain? Yes. Why? Evelyn considered her words carefully. Because Celeste enjoys attention. She enjoys admiration. She enjoys being pursued. Nathaniel remained silent. But she values her future too much to destroy it. You sound confident. I know her. He held her gaze for another moment. Then he walked back toward the fireplace. Most people who know someone well are often the last to recognize their mistakes. That is true. Yet you remain certain. I do. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Interesting. Evelyn hesitated. May I ask you something, Your Grace? You may. Did anything improper occur? The Duke looked almost amused. You are asking very directly. I thought you preferred honesty. A brief silence followed. Then something shifted in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. Or respect. It vanished too quickly to identify. Nothing improper occurred, he said. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. You seem relieved. I am. For your sister? Evelyn hesitated. For everyone. Nathaniel's gaze lingered on her face. Even now you are protecting other people. She frowned. I do not understand. Do you not? He returned to his chair. Your family's reputation is endangered. Your sister's future is uncertain. Yet the first emotion you displayed today was relief that no one had actually done anything wrong. Evelyn looked down at her folded hands. She was not sure how to answer that. Fortunately, he continued. Tell me about your sister. The request surprised her. What would you like to know? Anything. She thought for a moment. Celeste has always been the brightest person in any room. Brightest. In terms of attention. Nathaniel listened quietly. People notice her. Evelyn smiled faintly. Even when they are trying not to. And you? The question came again. She laughed softly. I suspect people notice me considerably less. Does that bother you? Evelyn expected the answer immediately. Instead, she found herself thinking. It used to. Nathaniel waited. When I was younger, I thought there must be something wrong with me. The admission escaped before she could stop it. Everyone admired Celeste. Everyone praised her. I assumed I had somehow failed at being interesting. The Duke remained silent. She appreciated that. Some confessions only survived because nobody interrupted them. Eventually I realized something. What? Not every person is meant to stand at the center of the room. Nathaniel looked toward the fire. That sounds remarkably lonely. The words startled her. It is not lonely. No, not anymore. He turned back toward her. I see. For reasons she could not explain, Evelyn suddenly wanted him to believe her. There are advantages to being overlooked. Such as, people reveal themselves when they think you are unimportant. This time the smile appeared fully. Brief but unmistakable. Transformed his entire face. That is true. The smile vanished almost immediately. Yet the room somehow felt different afterward. Less formal. Less guarded. A knock interrupted them. The butler entered carrying a silver tray. Several letters rested upon it. Nathaniel accepted them with a nod. The servant withdrew. The Duke glanced at the top envelope and sighed quietly. More gossip? Evelyn asked. More opinions. He set the letters aside unopened. London is full of them. That is one observation nobody would dispute. Another flicker of amusement crossed his features. Then his expression became serious again. Miss Hartwell. Yes. May I be candid? Please. I do not believe your family sent the correct daughter. The words struck harder than they should have. Evelyn stared at him. I beg your pardon? The person most affected by these rumors is your sister. That is true. Yet she is not here. No. Nathaniel folded his hands. You are. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Evelyn answered carefully. Celeste is distressed. I do not doubt that. My parents thought it best. Did they? His tone remained polite. Somehow that made it worse. Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. You disagree. I find it curious. How so? Nathaniel held her gaze. Your sister creates the crisis. The words were calm, matter of fact. Yet you are expected to solve it. The room went very still. Evelyn looked away first, because he was right. Not entirely, but enough. She had known it from the beginning. Hearing someone else say it aloud was different. For years she had accepted certain family patterns without examining them too closely. Now a near stranger had identified one within an hour. Families are complicated, she said quietly. Yes. Nathaniel's voice softened slightly. They are. Something passed between them then. Not romance. Not attraction. Recognition, perhaps. The understanding that some disappointments did not require explanation. The fire crackled softly in the silence. Outside, leaves drifted across the garden. Finally, Nathaniel rose. I believe I have taken enough of your afternoon. Evelyn stood as well. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for answering honestly. She moved toward the door. Then his voice stopped her. Miss Hartwell. She turned. Yes. Nathaniel hesitated. The pause felt unusual, as though he were considering whether to say something. Finally he did. You asked whether anything improper occurred. I did. Nothing did. Relief returned once more. Thank you. However, Evelyn stilled. The Duke's expression hardened slightly. There are aspects of this situation that do not make sense. Her heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? Nathaniel looked toward the unopened letters on his desk. I mean, rumors rarely spread this quickly without assistance. The implication settled heavily between them. You believe someone started them intentionally? I believe someone benefited from them. Evelyn stared at him. Who? His gray eyes met hers. Thoughtful. Careful. That is what I intend to discover. She left Ravenshire House carrying more questions than answers. Yet one certainty remained with her throughout the carriage ride home. Nathaniel Blackthorne had not looked at her the way most people did. He had not dismissed her. He had not spoken past her. He had not treated her as a convenient messenger. For the first time in years, someone had sat across from Evelyn Hartwell and seemed genuinely interested in what she thought. She could not decide whether that realization felt comforting or dangerous. And somewhere inside Ravenshire House, the Duke stood alone beside the study window long after her carriage disappeared from view, considering a quiet woman who had defended her sister without once defending herself. The Hartwell townhouse had never felt smaller. 2 days after Evelyn's visit to Ravenshire House, every room seemed crowded with anxiety. Newspapers continued arriving each morning. Visitors continued calling. Rumors continued multiplying. Yet no solution appeared. Evelyn sat in the library beside a rain-streaked window, attempting to read a novel she had already started 3 times. She had not made it beyond the same page. Her thoughts kept returning to Nathaniel Blackthorne. Not because of his title, not because of his wealth, because of what he had said. Your sister creates the crisis, yet you are expected to solve it. The words lingered in her mind like an uncomfortable truth she could no longer ignore. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Moments later the library door opened. Lord Malcolm entered. There you are. Evelyn closed her book. Has something happened? Her father's expression was strained. The Dowager Countess has requested another meeting. Evelyn frowned. With me. With all of us. A cold sensation settled in her stomach. Why? She did not explain. By 6 o'clock that evening, the Hartwell drawing room was prepared for distinguished guests. Lamps glowed warmly against polished wood. Silver tea service gleamed beneath candlelight. Servants moved quietly through the house. No one spoke above a whisper. The Dowager Countess of Ravenshire arrived precisely on time. She entered with calm authority and accepted greetings politely. Moments later, another visitor followed. Nathaniel Blackthorne stepped into the room. The atmosphere changed immediately. Evelyn noticed it at once. Her father straightened. Lady Beatrice became visibly nervous. Celeste adjusted her posture and lowered her gaze. Only the Duke appeared unaffected. His gray eyes briefly found Evelyn across the room. Then he turned his attention elsewhere. Everyone took their seats. Silence settled over the drawing room. Finally, the Dowager Countess folded her hands. "We are here because this situation has reached a point where it must be resolved." Lord Malcolm nodded eagerly. "We agree entirely." "Good." Her gaze moved toward Celeste. "Miss Hartwell, I understand the last several days have been difficult." Celeste looked appropriately distressed. "They have, your ladyship. And yet rumors continue." "I know." The older woman turned toward Nathaniel. "Would you care to explain the problem?" The Duke remained seated, calm, composed. "The problem is not the original rumor." Everyone listened carefully. "The problem is that someone appears determined to keep it alive." Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. Nathaniel continued. 3 separate newspapers received nearly identical anonymous accounts. Lord Malcolm frowned. "Surely that proves nothing." "No." Nathaniel's voice remained even. "It proves intention." A brief silence followed. "You believe someone is targeting Celeste?" Lady Beatrice asked. "Possibly." The Duke paused. "Or attempting to create pressure." Evelyn saw Celeste stiffen almost imperceptibly. The reaction lasted less than a second. Still, she noticed it. Nathaniel appeared to notice it as well. His gaze lingered briefly before moving on. "Pressure for what?" Lord Malcolm asked. The Duke looked directly at him. "Marriage." The room froze. Lady Beatrice inhaled sharply. Celeste lowered her eyes. Lord Malcolm leaned forward. "Your Grace." His voice carried obvious hope. "Perhaps that is exactly what we should discuss." Evelyn felt immediate dread. She already knew where the conversation was heading. The Dowager Countess appeared unimpressed. "Discuss what precisely?" Lord Malcolm cleared his throat. "The most effective way to end speculation would be a formal engagement." Nathaniel's expression did not change. "Indeed." "Certainly." Lord Malcolm forced a smile. "Society would immediately lose interest." The silence that followed became increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, the Duke spoke. "And whom would I be expected to marry?" Nobody answered immediately. That alone was answer enough. The Dowager Countess closed her eyes briefly as though fighting a headache. Lady Beatrice spoke next. "Your Grace, under ordinary circumstances we would never presume." Nathaniel said nothing. "However, given recent events." "Recent events." His voice remained perfectly calm. "You mean events that never occurred." Lady Beatrice faltered. "I only meant." "I know what you meant." The room grew quiet again. Evelyn looked down at her hands. Embarrassment crept across her skin. She wished the conversation would end. Instead it continued. Lord Malcolm pressed forward. "Surely you understand our position." Nathaniel regarded him steadily. "I understand your position very well." "Then perhaps." "No." The single word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Lord Malcolm blinked. "Your Grace." Nathaniel's gaze remained unwavering. "I will not become engaged simply because society enjoys inventing stories." Lady Beatrice visibly deflated. Celeste stared at the carpet. The rejection hung in the room. Heavy. Unavoidable. Evelyn almost felt relieved. It was honest. Painful perhaps, but honest. Then something unexpected happened. The Dowager Countess leaned forward slightly. "Nathaniel." The Duke turned toward his aunt. "Yes. There remains another issue." For the first time all evening, Nathaniel appeared cautious. "What issue?" "The Hartwell family is becoming a spectacle." Lady Beatrice looked mortified. The Countess continued anyway. Every day the gossip expands. Nathaniel nodded once. I am aware. And every day Miss Hartwell suffers for it. She looked toward Celeste. Particularly because she remains associated with your name. The Duke remained silent. You have no obligation to marry anyone. Correct. However, the situation cannot continue indefinitely. Evelyn sensed tension building beneath the surface of the conversation. Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly. What exactly are you suggesting? The Countess looked around the room. Then her gaze settled somewhere unexpected. On Evelyn. Not Celeste. Evelyn. Every person present seemed to notice simultaneously. Lord Malcolm looked confused. Lady Beatrice looked alarmed. Celeste looked startled. Evelyn herself felt utterly lost. The Countess spoke carefully. I am suggesting that everyone here has been focusing on the wrong daughter. Complete silence followed. Lord Malcolm stared. I do not understand. No. The older woman offered a faint smile. I suspect you do not. Nathaniel said nothing. Yet his eyes had moved toward Evelyn as well. The attention made her increasingly uncomfortable. Lady Beatrice recovered first. Surely there has been some misunderstanding. Has there? The Countess asked mildly. Miss Evelyn Hartwell met with Nathaniel. Yes. They spoke at length. That was simply to address the rumors. Of course. The Countess folded her hands. And yet she was the only person involved who spoke honestly. The room went still. Evelyn wished desperately to disappear. Lord Malcolm laughed awkwardly. Evelyn is sensible. She is considerably more than sensible. The Countess looked directly at Nathaniel. Would you disagree? Nathaniel's gaze remained on Evelyn for several seconds. Long enough for everyone to notice. No. The answer was quiet. Firm. Immediate. Something shifted inside the room. Evelyn felt it happen. The balance changed. Attention moved. Not entirely. Not yet. But enough. Celeste looked up sharply. Lady Beatrice seemed unable to process what she had just heard. Lord Malcolm appeared bewildered. Evelyn herself could barely breathe. The Dowager Countess continued. One daughter has spent the last week defending herself. Her eyes moved briefly towards Celeste. The other has spent the last week defending everyone else. Nobody spoke. One daughter attracts attention naturally. Another pause. The other earns respect. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, Lord Malcolm cleared his throat. I appreciate your confidence in Evelyn. His smile looked forced. However, I fail to see what relevance this has to the current matter. The Countess opened her mouth. Nathaniel interrupted her. It has considerable relevance. Every head turned toward him. The Duke rose slowly from his chair. Because this discussion has been based upon a flawed assumption from the beginning. Lord Malcolm frowned. What assumption? Nathaniel looked directly at him. That if I were to marry a Hartwell daughter, there is only one possible choice. The room stopped breathing. Evelyn felt her heartbeat pound inside her ears. Lady Beatrice stared openly. Celeste looked as though she had forgotten how to blink. Even the Dowager Countess appeared surprised that he had spoken aloud. Nathaniel remained perfectly calm. I have no intention of becoming engaged because of gossip. Lord Malcolm nodded quickly. Naturally. However, the single word changed everything. Every eye fixed upon him. The Duke's gaze moved across the room until it settled on Evelyn. Not briefly. Not accidentally. Deliberately. If a marriage were ever to occur. His voice remained steady. It would not be with Miss Celeste Hartwell. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The fire crackled softly in the silence. Then Nathaniel delivered the sentence that shattered every expectation in the room. It would be with Miss Evelyn Hartwell. For one endless moment the world seemed to stop. Evelyn felt every gaze swing toward her. Shock, disbelief, confusion. Across the room, Celeste had gone completely pale. Lord Malcolm looked as though he had forgotten where he was. Lady Beatrice opened her mouth and closed it again. No sound emerged. Only Nathaniel remained unchanged. Calm. Certain. Watching. The silence stretched until it became almost painful. Then the Dowager Countess slowly leaned back in her chair. A small smile touched her lips. Not surprise, satisfaction. As though she had been waiting for everyone else to arrive at a conclusion she had recognized days earlier. And standing at the center of the storm she had never wanted, Evelyn realized her life had just divided into two parts. Everything before this moment, and everything that would come after it. By sunrise the entire city seemed to know. Evelyn discovered it the moment she entered the breakfast room. 3 newspapers sat beside her father's plate. 2 more had been delivered to the library. A fresh stack waited unopened on a side table near the entrance hall. London had found a new story. More importantly, London had found a new target. Lord Malcolm looked exhausted. Lady Beatrice appeared horrified. Celeste had not come downstairs at all. Evelyn paused beside the table. Has something happened? Her father stared at her as though she had asked whether the sky was blue. Half the city is discussing last night. She lowered herself into a chair. That was inevitable. Inevitable? Lady Beatrice repeated. The Duke of Ravenshire practically announced his preference before witnesses. Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. He did not announce anything. No. Lady Beatrice pushed one of the newspapers toward her. Read that. Evelyn glanced down. The article occupied nearly half a page. Most of it consisted of speculation disguised as observation. The Duke's unusual attention toward Miss Evelyn Hartwell. Possible future alliance. A surprising shift away from the younger sister previously associated with the scandal. She closed the paper immediately. This is ridiculous. Unfortunately, Lord Malcolm muttered. Ridiculous stories sell newspapers. The morning continued badly. 2 invitations were withdrawn. 3 social calls were cancelled. One family who had spent years courting Celeste's friendship suddenly claimed to be unavailable. The scandal had not disappeared. It had simply changed shape. Shortly after noon another visitor arrived. The Dowager Countess. Evelyn was summoned to the drawing room at once. She found the older woman standing beside a window overlooking the garden. Your ladyship. The Countess turned and smiled. Good afternoon, Evelyn. The use of her first name felt deliberate. I assume you have come regarding yesterday. Partly. The Countess studied her carefully. How are you managing? Evelyn laughed softly. I am not entirely certain. An honest answer. The older woman crossed the room. You have become the subject of attention very suddenly. That is one way to describe it. And how does it feel? Evelyn considered the question. Uncomfortable. The Countess looked pleased by the answer. Good. Evelyn blinked. Good. People who enjoy attention too much rarely handle power responsibly. The older woman accepted a cup of tea from a servant. Discomfort can be useful. Evelyn sat quietly. After a moment she asked the question she had been avoiding since last night. Did the Duke mean what he said? The Countess's eyes sparkled slightly. Which part? You know which part. Yes. She smiled into her tea. I do. Evelyn waited. The Countess allowed the silence to stretch before finally answering. Nathaniel does not make statements lightly. That did not actually answer the question. Unfortunately, the older woman appeared perfectly aware of that fact. Before Evelyn could ask again, the drawing room door opened. Nathaniel himself entered. Every coherent thought immediately vanished from Evelyn's mind. The Duke looked as composed as ever. Dark coat, immaculate cravat, calm expression. He greeted his aunt first. Then his gaze shifted toward Evelyn. Miss Hartwell, Your Grace. A brief silence followed. The Countess set down her teacup. Excellent. Both younger people looked toward her. You may explain things to each other while I enjoy the garden. Nathaniel frowned slightly. Aunt, do not look at me that way. The older woman rose gracefully. You created this situation. You may manage it. 5 seconds later she was gone. Evelyn stared after her. Nathaniel looked equally resigned. She enjoys this. Very much. The Duke exhaled quietly and moved toward the fireplace. I apologize. For what? The consequences of yesterday. Evelyn folded her hands together. You did not force the newspapers to print gossip. No. He paused. But I contributed. She studied him carefully. Why did you say it? The question hung between them. Nathaniel did not answer immediately. Because it was true. Her pulse stumbled unexpectedly. The Duke continued before she could respond. Everyone in that room assumed only one Hartwell daughter deserved consideration. That is hardly unusual. Perhaps not. His gray eyes held hers. I found it irritating. A surprising laugh escaped her. Nathaniel looked almost pleased. There it is. What? The expression from my study. Evelyn frowned. I have no idea what you mean. You do. The faintest smile appeared. You look entirely different when you stop being careful. For reasons she could not explain, that observation affected her more than any compliment. Nobody noticed Evelyn. Nobody watched her closely enough to identify differences in expression. Nobody except him, apparently. The realization felt dangerous. A servant entered carrying a silver envelope. He handed it directly to Nathaniel. The Duke read the contents. Then he sighed. What now? Evelyn asked. Nathaniel passed her the invitation. Her eyes widened as she scanned the elegant handwriting. Lady Whitmore's Autumn Charity Gala. One of the largest social gatherings of the season. The event would take place in 3 nights. Nearly everyone important would attend. I assume you are going. Nathaniel nodded. Unfortunately. Then why do you look displeased? Because Lady Whitmore is not inviting me. Evelyn looked back at the card. Understanding arrived immediately. She is inviting us. Exactly. Silence followed. The significance became impossible to ignore. Public appearance. Public scrutiny. Public speculation. Lady Whitmore had essentially invited London society to witness whatever happened next. Nathaniel sat opposite her. We have a problem. Several, actually. True. His expression became serious. The rumors are no longer fading. Evelyn nodded. I know. They will worsen at the gala. I know that too. Nathaniel leaned back slightly. Then we need to decide how to respond. She looked at him. What do you suggest? Visibility. The answer surprised her. Visibility. If we hide, people will assume the worst. He folded his arms. If we appear together, the speculation changes. Evelyn understood immediately. Society respected confidence. It devoured weakness. You want me to attend with you? Yes. The word landed softly, firmly. Only if you are willing. That last sentence mattered. He could have issued instructions. Instead, he offered a choice. Evelyn noticed. So did he. You are giving me an opportunity to refuse. Of course. She almost smiled. Most dukes would not. Most dukes are exhausting. The remark caught her off guard. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. Nathaniel's eyes warmed slightly. Just slightly. There is the expression again. Evelyn shook her head. You seem strangely determined to make me laugh. Perhaps. The answer carried enough honesty to unsettle her. Neither spoke for several moments. Outside the windows, afternoon sunlight spread across the gardens. Inside, the atmosphere felt unexpectedly peaceful. Then the peace shattered. The drawing room door opened abruptly. Celeste entered. Her appearance alone revealed the difficult days she had endured. Dark circles lingered beneath her eyes. Her smile looked forced, yet she remained beautiful. Strikingly so. The moment she noticed Nathaniel, hope flashed across her face. The moment she noticed Evelyn sitting beside him, that hope vanished. Your Grace. Nathaniel rose politely. Miss Hartwell. The formal distance in his voice was impossible to miss. Celeste noticed. Evelyn saw the realization strike her sister. Pain followed immediately afterward. I did not realize you were visiting. Celeste looked between them. Nathaniel answered calmly. I came regarding Lady Whitmore's gala. The gala. Her voice softened. Yes, of course. A silence settled over the room. Awkward. Heavy. Finally Celeste forced a smile. I imagine you will attend. Nathaniel nodded. I will. Wonderful. She turned toward Evelyn. And you? I have been invited. Celeste's smile tightened. How fortunate. The words sounded pleasant. The emotion behind them did not. Evelyn felt a pang of guilt. Celeste had spent years receiving admiration without effort. Now that admiration had shifted. Not entirely, not permanently, but enough to frighten her. Nathaniel appeared to recognize it as well. His expression softened slightly. Miss Hartwell. Celeste looked up. Yes. Whatever else happens, I hope the rumors end soon. Genuine kindness colored his voice. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet the response seemed to wound her anyway, because it sounded like sympathy rather than interest. Celeste lowered her gaze. Thank you. A few moments later she excused herself and left. The silence she left behind felt different than before. Sadder somehow. Evelyn stared toward the closed door. She is hurting. Nathaniel remained quiet. I know. This has been difficult for her. I know that too. Evelyn looked at him. Then why do I feel as though there is something you are not saying? The Duke's gaze drifted toward the windows. Because there is. Her heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? Nathaniel hesitated. For the first time since she had met him, uncertainty crossed his features. I am not yet certain. Certain of what? He looked back at her. Of who benefits most from keeping this scandal alive. The room grew still. Evelyn remembered his warning from days earlier. Someone benefited from the rumors. Someone wanted pressure. Someone wanted attention directed toward a specific outcome. The thought returned now with renewed force. You still believe this was deliberate? Yes. Do you have proof? Not yet. Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly. But I intend to find it. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Arrangements were made for the gala. Details were discussed. Practical matters filled the remaining time. Yet long after the Duke departed, Evelyn remained beside the drawing room window, watching his carriage disappear down the street, thinking. For most of her life she had occupied the edge of every room. Invisible, ignored, safe. Now all of London seemed determined to look directly at her. And in 3 nights, beneath another ballroom full of chandeliers and whispers, she would walk into that attention with the most powerful duke in England at her side. Whether that protected her or placed her in even greater danger, she could not yet tell. But for the first time in years, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not be standing alone. The night of Lady Whitmore's gala arrived beneath a clear autumn sky. Hundreds of carriage lamps illuminated the street outside the mansion. Music drifted through open windows. Laughter spilled into the evening air. Every important family in London seemed determined to attend. Inside the Hartwell townhouse, preparations had consumed the entire afternoon. Servants hurried through hallways carrying garment boxes and trays of jewelry. Lady Beatrice moved from room to room issuing instructions. Lord Malcolm remained unusually silent. Only Evelyn appeared calm, at least on the surface. Martha fastened the final button of her emerald silk gown and stepped back. You look beautiful. Evelyn glanced at her reflection. The dress was elegant without being extravagant. The color deepened the green of her eyes. Her chestnut hair had been arranged in soft waves pinned carefully above her shoulders. You are kind. I'm honest. Martha adjusted a loose curl. Half the women in London would envy that gown. Evelyn smiled faintly. Most of them own 3 better ones. That isn't the point. Martha folded her arms. You finally look like someone who belongs in those ballrooms. The words lingered longer than either woman expected. Because for years Evelyn had often felt as though she did not belong there at all. A knock sounded at the door. A maid entered. Miss Hartwell, your family is waiting downstairs. Evelyn rose. Her pulse quickened unexpectedly. Tonight would not be like previous social events. Tonight every eye would be watching. Every whisper would concern her. The realization felt surreal. She descended the staircase slowly. Lady Beatrice looked up first. For a moment genuine surprise crossed her face. Evelyn. She blinked. You look lovely. The compliment seemed to catch both of them off guard. Evelyn simply nodded. Thank you. Celeste stood near the entrance hall dressed in pale blue silk. Normally she would have been the most admired woman in any room. Tonight, uncertainty lingered beneath her composure. She offered a polite smile. "The color suits you." "Thank you." Another awkward silence followed. Neither sister seemed entirely sure how to navigate their new reality. Moments later, the family departed. The journey to Lady Whitmore's mansion felt shorter than usual. Perhaps because Evelyn spent most of it staring through the carriage window while trying not to think about what awaited her. Unfortunately, it was impossible not to think about it. The moment their carriage arrived, the scale of the evening became obvious. Footmen lined the entrance steps. Lanterns glowed across manicured gardens. Music echoed through the open doors. More importantly, people were already watching. Evelyn noticed the stairs before she even entered the ballroom. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Fans lifted discreetly. The attention felt almost physical. Beside her, Lady Beatrice stiffened. "Ignore them." Evelyn nearly laughed. "That may be difficult." They entered the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers bathed everything in golden light. Hundreds of guests filled the room. Silk gowns shimmered beneath the glow. Orchestral music drifted through the crowd. Yet despite all the beauty, one fact became obvious within seconds. News had spread far beyond the newspapers. People were staring directly at her. Not Celeste. Her. Good heavens! A woman near the entrance whispered loudly enough to be heard. "It really is the elder sister. I heard the Duke requested her company personally." "Surely not. That is what everyone says." Evelyn kept her expression calm. Years of social training proved useful. Inside, however, her nerves tightened with every step. Celeste heard the comments too. Evelyn saw it in the way her sister's smile briefly faltered. The situation felt increasingly painful. For everyone. Lady Whitmore appeared moments later. The hostess greeted the Hartwells enthusiastically. Perhaps too enthusiastically. "Miss Hartwell." Her eyes sparkled. "How delighted I am that you came." Evelyn recognized curiosity disguised as hospitality when she heard it. "Thank you for inviting me." "My dear, the entire city would have been disappointed if you had not attended." The woman laughed. Evelyn wished she were joking. Unfortunately, she probably was not. More guests approached. Introductions followed. Conversations unfolded. Through it all, Evelyn remained acutely aware of one thing. Nathaniel had not yet arrived. The absence should not have mattered. It did anyway. Nearly 30 minutes passed. Then the atmosphere changed. The shift moved through the ballroom like a ripple across water. People straightened. Voices lowered. Attention drifted toward the entrance. Evelyn did not need anyone to announce his arrival. Somehow she already knew. The butler's voice echoed across the room. "His Grace, the Duke of Ravenshire." The effect proved immediate. Guests turned. Conversations stopped. The crowd parted naturally as Nathaniel entered. Dressed in formal black evening attire, he moved through the ballroom with the same controlled confidence she had come to recognize. Yet tonight something felt different. His gaze did not wander across the room. He appeared to be searching for someone. A moment later he found her. Their eyes met across the ballroom. The surrounding noise seemed to fade. Nathaniel inclined his head slightly. Not toward the crowd. Toward her. Then he began walking in her direction. Every person nearby noticed. Evelyn could practically hear speculation exploding around the room. Lady Beatrice gripped her fan. Celeste went very still. Nathaniel reached them within moments. He greeted Lord Malcolm politely, acknowledged Lady Beatrice, nodded toward Celeste. Then his full attention settled on Evelyn. "Miss Hartwell." "Your Grace." The familiar exchange somehow felt different tonight. More personal. More visible. Nathaniel glanced briefly around the ballroom. "I trust the evening has been tolerable so far." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "That depends entirely upon one's definition of tolerable." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. A fair answer. Several nearby guests openly stared. They were not even attempting discretion anymore. Nathaniel noticed. Unlike everyone else, he appeared completely unconcerned. "May I borrow Miss Hartwell for a moment?" Lord Malcolm answered before Evelyn could speak. "Certainly." Nathaniel extended his arm. The gesture itself was simple, ordinary even. Yet the ballroom reacted as though cannon fire had echoed through the room. Evelyn felt hundreds of eyes upon her as she accepted. Together they crossed the ballroom floor. Whispers followed immediately. He chose her. In front of everyone. What does it mean? Surely an engagement is coming. Nathaniel guided her toward a quieter corner near the orchestra. You appear uncomfortable. That is because half of London is watching us. Only half. The dry remark nearly made her laugh. You are impossible. I have been called worse. For a few moments they stood together while music drifted around them. The atmosphere remained strangely easy despite the attention surrounding them. Then a familiar voice interrupted. Your Grace. Evelyn turned. Lady Veronica Ashcombe stood nearby surrounded by companions. Elegant, wealthy, influential, and smiling with unmistakable sweetness. Dangerous sweetness. Lady Veronica. Nathaniel's tone remained polite. Nothing more. The woman glanced toward Evelyn. Miss Hartwell. Lady Veronica. The smile widened. I was just telling my friends how remarkable this entire situation has been. Evelyn already disliked where the conversation was heading. Lady Veronica continued anyway. One hardly knows which sister to congratulate. Several women nearby exchanged looks. Nathaniel's expression cooled instantly. I fail to see the confusion. Lady Veronica blinked. Your Grace. The matter seems quite straightforward. The sweetness in her smile faltered slightly. Of course. Good. Silence followed. Brief but sharp. Yet Lady Veronica persisted. I only meant that circumstances change so unexpectedly. One sister spends years attracting admiration. Then suddenly the other becomes the center of attention. Evelyn felt the insult beneath the words. So did everyone else. Before she could respond, Nathaniel spoke. You are correct. Lady Veronica looked pleased. I am. Yes. His voice remained perfectly calm. Because attention and worth have never been the same thing. The ballroom around them seemed to grow quieter. Lady Veronica's face lost color. Nathaniel continued. Many people confused the two. No one moved. No one spoke. The message had landed precisely where intended. Lady Veronica managed a strained smile. Naturally. Naturally. Nathaniel inclined his head politely. The dismissal could not have been clearer. Moments later she retreated. Her companions followed. Evelyn stared at him. You did not have to do that. Yes. His gaze remained on the retreating group. I did. The simple certainty in his voice startled her. Before she could answer, the orchestra began a new waltz. Couples moved toward the center of the ballroom. Music swelled beneath the chandeliers. Nathaniel turned back toward her. For one brief second neither spoke. Then he extended his hand. Miss Hartwell. Her pulse instantly accelerated. Yes. Would you honor me with this dance? The question echoed far beyond the space between them. Nearby conversations stopped. Guests openly watched. Across the ballroom, heads turned. Evelyn felt the weight of attention settle upon her shoulders. Months ago she would have retreated. Years ago she would have assumed he meant someone else. Tonight she met Nathaniel's gaze directly. You realize everyone is watching. I do. And that does not concern you? The faintest smile touched his lips. Not particularly. A nervous laugh escaped her. Nathaniel's hand remained extended. Steady. Certain. Waiting. Evelyn looked at it. Then at him. Finally she placed her hand in his. Then I would be honored. The reaction throughout the ballroom proved immediate. A collective hush followed them as Nathaniel led her onto the dance floor. Couples shifted aside. Conversations faded. Even the musicians seemed aware of the moment unfolding before them. Evelyn felt her heart pounding as Nathaniel settled his hand respectfully at her waist. The waltz began. They moved together across the polished floor. Graceful. Controlled. Visible. Very visible. Yet, after the first few measures, something unexpected happened. The whispers disappeared. Not from the room. From her mind. Because Nathaniel's attention never wandered. Not once. He did not scan the ballroom. He did not acknowledge the spectators. He danced as though she were the only person who mattered at that moment. You are thinking very hard. His voice was low enough for only her to hear. Evelyn smiled. I am trying to survive this evening. How is that progressing? Ask me tomorrow. The answer earned another rare smile. Around them the ballroom watched in stunned silence. The forgotten daughter. The overlooked sister. The woman who usually stood unnoticed at the edge of every room. Tonight she occupied the center of the floor beside the most powerful duke in England. And for the first time in her life, nobody was looking past her. They were looking directly at her. And Nathaniel Blackthorne had made certain of it. The applause followed them long after the dance ended. Not loud applause. That would have been improper. This was something far more powerful. Approval. Recognition. Interest. The sort that traveled through a ballroom and settled into every conversation for the rest of the evening. Evelyn returned to the edge of the dance floor feeling as though she had stepped into someone else's life. Nathaniel remained beside her, completely unconcerned by the attention, completely aware of its effect. You planned that. She spoke quietly. His expression remained innocent. Planned what? The dance. I requested a dance. In front of half of London. Technically, all of London would not fit inside this ballroom. Despite herself, she laughed. Nathaniel's eyes softened briefly. Then a footman approached carrying a silver tray. Your Grace. The servant lowered his voice. A message has arrived. Nathaniel accepted the folded note. His expression changed almost immediately. The shift was subtle. Most people would have missed it. Evelyn did not. The amusement vanished. Focus replaced it. Bad news? She asked. Nathaniel folded the paper. Potentially useful news. Before she could ask more, Lady Whitmore appeared with several guests in tow. Conversation resumed. Introductions followed. Social obligations consumed the next hour. Yet throughout it all, Evelyn noticed something unusual. Nathaniel seemed distracted. Not rude. Not absent. Simply alert, as though he were listening for something beneath the music and conversation. Near midnight, the gala finally began winding down. Carriages arrived. Guests departed. The crowd slowly thinned. Nathaniel escorted Evelyn and her family to their carriage personally. Another gesture guaranteed to dominate tomorrow's gossip. Lord Malcolm looked increasingly overwhelmed by events he no longer controlled. Lady Beatrice appeared torn between confusion and cautious optimism. Celeste remained quiet, very quiet. As Nathaniel helped Evelyn into the carriage, he paused. May I call tomorrow? The question sounded perfectly proper. Yet her pulse quickened anyway. Of course. His gaze held hers for a moment. There are several matters we should discuss. Regarding the rumors? Among other things. Before she could ask what that meant, he stepped back. The carriage door closed. The journey home passed mostly in silence. Only once did anyone speak. Everyone was staring at you. The comment came from Celeste. Evelyn looked up. Her sister sat across from her in the dim carriage light. They were staring at both of us. Celeste smiled faintly. No. The answer arrived quietly. Not anymore. The words lingered painfully between them. Back at the townhouse, Evelyn slept poorly. Not because of the ballroom. Not because of Nathaniel. Because of Celeste. Something felt wrong. Her sister had always loved admiration. Yet tonight her disappointment seemed deeper than wounded pride. Felt personal. By morning the feeling remained. Shortly after breakfast, Nathaniel arrived exactly as promised. He requested a private conversation. Lord Malcolm approved immediately. 20 minutes later, Evelyn found herself seated in the Hartwell Library opposite the Duke. Sunlight filtered through tall windows. A fire crackled softly despite the mild weather. Nathaniel wasted no time. I received new information last night. Her pulse quickened. About the rumors? Yes. He reached into his coat and withdrew several folded papers. 3 anonymous letters were delivered to newspaper offices before the scandal appeared publicly. Evelyn leaned forward. You found them? Eventually. He handed her the documents. She examined them carefully. The handwriting appeared disguised. The language was vague. Yet certain details stood out. Details only a handful of people should have known. These were written before the rumors spread. Correct. Nathaniel folded his arms. Which means someone expected the scandal to happen. Evelyn looked up sharply. Expected. Or planned for it. The room suddenly felt colder. She glanced back at the papers. Who would do something like that? That is the question. Nathaniel moved toward the window. However, another name continues appearing around the edges of the situation. What name? His expression hardened. Lord Alistair Vane. Evelyn frowned. The name sounded familiar. I have met him. I know. She blinked. You do. He attended several events involving your family this season. Nathaniel turned back toward her. Particularly events involving your sister. The memory returned gradually. Charming smile. Expensive clothes. Easy manners. Lord Alistair Vane had been a frequent visitor during the summer. Celeste always seemed pleased when he appeared. He was interested in her. Perhaps. Nathaniel's answer carried enough doubt to make Evelyn uneasy. You disagree? I think Lord Vane is interested in opportunities. The statement sounded carefully chosen. Evelyn studied him. You know something. Not enough. His jaw tightened slightly. Yet. Before she could ask more, a knock interrupted them. A servant entered carrying correspondence. Several letters rested on a silver tray. Nathaniel accepted them automatically. One envelope immediately caught his attention. He opened it, read silently, then swore under his breath. Not loudly, not dramatically, simply with the frustration of a man whose suspicions had just deepened. Evelyn sat forward. What happened? Nathaniel handed her the page. Her eyes widened. It was a guest list, not for a ball. For a private gathering held 6 days before the original scandal. Lord Alistair Vane's name appeared prominently. So did Celeste's. That alone meant little. Another detail mattered far more. The Duke of Ravenshire. Evelyn looked up. You attended? No. Nathaniel's voice remained flat. I declined the invitation. She read the list again. Confusion deepened. Then why include your name? An excellent question. The silence stretched. Then another realization struck her. Someone wanted people to believe you would be there. Nathaniel nodded once. Exactly. The pieces remained incomplete. Yet a pattern was beginning to emerge. Someone had connected his name to social events. Someone had positioned Celeste nearby. Someone had ensured rumors spread immediately afterward. The coincidence felt increasingly impossible to believe. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel departed. He promised to continue investigating. Evelyn spent the remainder of the day attempting to organize her thoughts. Unfortunately, the situation only grew stranger. Near sunset, she climbed the main staircase toward her room. Halfway down the corridor, she noticed a maid leaving Celeste's chamber carrying a basket of discarded papers. Nothing unusual about that, until a folded fragment slipped from the basket and drifted onto the carpet. The maid continued walking without noticing. Evelyn bent automatically to retrieve it. Her intention was simply to return it. Then she glanced down. Her footsteps stopped. The paper contained only part of a letter. Most of it had been torn away, yet several lines remained intact. The handwriting looked familiar, very familiar. Evelyn stared at the elegant loops and careful slant of the ink. She had seen that handwriting hundreds of times. Notes, invitations, shopping lists, birthday cards. Celeste. Her heartbeat accelerated. Slowly she read the surviving words. Ensure he sees me before the announcement. Everything depends on timing. The sentence ended abruptly where the paper had been ripped. Evelyn stared at it. Confusion gave way to disbelief. Then uncertainty. Perhaps it meant nothing. Could refer to anyone. Any situation. Any plan. Yet the timing felt impossible to ignore. She folded the fragment carefully and slipped it into her pocket. A few minutes later, she found Celeste alone in the morning room. Her sister sat beside the window pretending to read. Pretending very poorly. May I ask you something? Evelyn said. Celeste looked up. Of course. Evelyn hesitated. Part of her wanted to walk away. Instead, she withdrew the paper fragment. "Do you recognize this?" For a split second something flashed across Celeste's face. Alarm. It disappeared almost instantly. Too quickly for most people to notice. Not quickly enough for Evelyn. "It looks like part of a letter." "Your letter." Celeste laughed lightly. "Perhaps." The answer felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. "What does it mean?" Evelyn asked. "How should I know?" Her sister looked away. "It is only half a sentence." Silence settled between them. Then Celeste forced a smile. "You are becoming suspicious, Evelyn." The remark was intended to sound playful. Failed. "Should I not be?" For the first time, genuine tension entered the room. Celeste set aside her book. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I do not know." That was the truth. "But something about this entire situation feels strange." Celeste's expression cooled. "You sound like the Duke." The comment surprised her. "What does that mean?" "It means he looks for mysteries everywhere." Her sister rose. "Not every unfortunate event is part of a conspiracy." "Perhaps not." Celeste moved toward the door. "I am tired of discussing it." A moment later she left. Evelyn remained beside the window, watching the closed door, thinking. For the first time in her life, she questioned whether she truly understood her sister. The realization hurt more than she expected. Outside, twilight settled across London. Inside Ravenshire House, Nathaniel Blackthorne sat alone in his study reviewing fresh reports from his investigators. One name continued appearing. One pattern continued repeating. And with every new piece of information, he became more convinced that the scandal had never been an accident. Somewhere beneath the rumors, someone had been playing a careful game. The troubling part was no longer whether a trap existed. The troubling part was discovering who had built it, and why Evelyn Hartwell seemed to be the last person anyone expected to uncover the truth. The church bells began ringing before Evelyn was ready to hear them. Their distant chime drifted through the open window of her bedchamber on a cold November morning. Somewhere beyond the gray London sky, a city was already awake. Carriages rolled across damp streets. Shopkeepers opened doors. Servants hurried through noble households. And by evening, Evelyn Hartwell would become the Duchess of Ravenshire. She stood motionless before the mirror while Martha adjusted the final folds of ivory silk. The wedding gown was elegant rather than extravagant. Nathaniel had insisted upon that. He disliked displays designed solely to impress strangers. The simplicity somehow made the occasion feel even more significant. "You haven't moved in 5 minutes." Martha stepped back and studied her reflection. "Are you nervous?" Evelyn laughed softly. "I believe I have passed nervousness and entered an entirely different condition." "That sounds alarming." "It feels alarming." The maid smiled. "For what it's worth, I've never seen you look happier." The comment caught Evelyn off guard. Happier? She stared at her reflection. The last several weeks had been chaotic. Rumors, questions, investigations, endless scrutiny. Yet beneath it all something unexpected had happened. Nathaniel had become the person she trusted most. Not because he promised grand romantic declarations. He never did. Not because he rescued her from every problem. He did not. He listened. He paid attention. He saw her. The realization warmed her chest. A knock sounded. Lady Beatrice entered. The room immediately grew quiet. For several moments neither woman spoke. Their relationship had never been particularly close. Too many years of distance stood between them. Yet this morning felt different. Lady Beatrice crossed the room slowly. "You look beautiful." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you." Her stepmother hesitated. "I owe you an apology." That was the last thing Evelyn expected to hear. "You do not owe me anything." "Yes." Lady Beatrice's eyes glistened slightly. "I do." The older woman clasped her hands together. "For years I convinced myself I was doing what was best for this family." Silence filled the room. "Sometimes I forgot what was best for you." Evelyn looked away briefly. The words hurt because they were true. Yet they also carried sincerity. Something rare. Something long overdue. Today should be about happiness. Lady Beatrice managed a faint smile. "Not regret, Before Evelyn could respond, the older woman stepped forward and gently adjusted a loose strand of hair. A simple gesture. One she could barely remember receiving as a child. "You deserve this happiness." Then she left. Martha pretended not to notice the moisture gathering in Evelyn's eyes. For that, she was grateful. An hour later, the carriage journey began. The wedding would take place at St. Aldwyn's Chapel, a historic stone church belonging to the Ravenshire estate. The route there seemed lined with spectators. Word had spread far beyond aristocratic circles. People wanted to witness the unusual match. The overlooked daughter, the powerful duke. The story had captured imaginations throughout the city. Inside the carriage, however, none of that mattered. Evelyn sat quietly beside her father. Lord Malcolm looked unusually solemn. "You are certain?" he asked suddenly. She smiled. "A little late for doubts, father." "That was not what I meant." His voice softened. "I mean him." The question surprised her. For years, her father had measured men according to titles, influence, and financial stability. Now he seemed concerned with something else entirely. "Yes." The answer came easily. "I am certain." Lord Malcolm nodded slowly. Then he looked out the window. Neither spoke again. St. Aldwyn's appeared through the morning mist like something from a painting. Gray stone walls, tall stained glass windows, ancient oak doors. Hundreds of guests filled the grounds outside. Carriages stretched down the road. Society had arrived in force. Evelyn's pulse accelerated the moment the carriage stopped. Reality settled around her. This was happening. Today. Not someday. Not eventually. Today. A footman opened the door. The noise outside swelled instantly. Voices. Movement. Anticipation. Lord Malcolm offered his arm. Together they approached the chapel entrance. Inside, candlelight flickered against stone walls. Flowers decorated every aisle. Music drifted softly through the air. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, Evelyn noticed something else. The atmosphere felt strange. Not hostile. Not welcoming either. Curious. Measuring. She recognized many faces. Some had ignored her for years. Others had openly favored Celeste. Now they watched her walk down the aisle as though seeing her for the first time. The irony was almost amusing. Then she saw her family seated near the front. Lady Beatrice looked emotional. Several relatives appeared uncertain. Celeste sat perfectly still. Her pale blue gown complemented her beauty. Yet there was no mistaking the tension in her posture. For a moment the sisters looked at each other. Neither smiled. Neither looked away. Then the organ music changed. The signal arrived. Every guest rose to their feet. Evelyn turned toward the aisle and saw Nathaniel, standing near the altar beneath sunlight streaming through stained glass. Waiting. Not distracted. Not impatient. Waiting. The sight stole her breath. He looked exactly as she remembered. Strong. Composed. Unshakably calm. Yet something in his expression softened the moment he saw her. The distance between them suddenly felt insignificant. Lord Malcolm guided her forward. One step, then another. The chapel disappeared around her. The guests vanished. The whispers faded. Only Nathaniel remained. Halfway down the aisle, she heard murmurs ripple through the congregation. They grew louder near the front. Confusion spread among several guests. Evelyn frowned slightly. Something was happening. Then she noticed movement near the entrance. Late arrivals. Not unusual, except the faces accompanying them. Lord Alistair Vane had entered the chapel. Several guests immediately recognized him. More whispers followed. Evelyn felt unease settle in her stomach. Nathaniel noticed him too. Their eyes met briefly across the chapel. The Duke's expression hardened. Only for a second. Then it disappeared. By the time Evelyn reached the altar, his composure had returned completely. Lord Malcolm placed her hand into Nathaniel's. The familiar warmth steadied her instantly. "You look worried." Nathaniel's voice remained low enough for only her to hear. "Lord Vane is here." "I know." "Should he be?" Pause followed. Then Nathaniel answered quietly. "Probably not." Before she could ask more, the ceremony began. The minister spoke. Vows followed. Responses echoed beneath the chapel ceiling. Yet throughout it all Evelyn sensed something unusual. Nathaniel never looked away. Not once. Not toward Lord Vane. Not toward the guests. Not toward the growing whispers. Only toward her. As though everything else had become irrelevant. Gradually her anxiety faded. The ceremony continued. Promise after promise. Word after word. Then came the final question. The minister turned toward Nathaniel. Do you freely and willingly take this woman as your wife? Silence settled across the chapel. Nathaniel did not hesitate. I do. The answer rang clear and certain. No pause. No doubt. No hesitation. Emotion tightened Evelyn's throat unexpectedly. The minister turned toward her. Do you freely and willingly take this man as your husband? She looked into Nathaniel's eyes. Into the steady confidence she had come to trust. Into the quiet strength that had changed her life. I do. The words emerged softly, yet they felt stronger than any speech she had ever given. The minister smiled. Then by the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Applause erupted immediately. Genuine applause this time. Guests rose. Smiles appeared. Congratulations spread throughout the chapel. The tension that had dominated recent weeks seemed to dissolve all at once. Nathaniel squeezed her hand gently. Welcome to Ravenshire, Duchess. The title felt unreal. Evelyn laughed through sudden tears. I believe it may take some time to become accustomed to that. Take all the time you need. Together they turned toward the congregation. Hundreds of faces looked back at them. Some surprised. Some approving. Some envious. None mattered very much, because for the first time in her life, Evelyn was not standing in someone else's shadow. She was not repairing another person's mistake. She was not waiting to be noticed. She stood beside a man who had chosen her openly, publicly, without hesitation. Yet even as applause filled the chapel, another story continued unfolding beneath the celebration. Near the back pews, Lord Alistair Vane quietly left before the reception began. Few people noticed. Nathaniel did. And as the newly married couple walked together down the aisle, the Duke's attention lingered briefly on the closing chapel doors. The wedding had ended. The mystery had not. Somewhere beyond the celebration, pieces were still moving. Secrets were still hidden. And sooner or later, the truth behind the scandal would demand to be heard. Ravenshire Manor felt nothing like the houses Evelyn had known before. The estate stretched across rolling countryside several hours from London. Ancient oak trees lined the winding drive. Stone walls stood covered in ivy. Wide fields faded into distant hills beneath gray autumn skies. The property possessed the quiet confidence of something that had endured generations. It did not need to impress anyone. The moment their carriage arrived, dozens of servants gathered outside the entrance. Footmen, housemaids, groundskeepers, stable hands. They stood in neat rows waiting to greet their new duchess. Evelyn nearly wished the earth would swallow her whole. Nathaniel stepped from the carriage first. Then he turned and offered his hand. A simple gesture. One he always seemed to perform as though it were the most natural thing in the world. You look alarmed. Evelyn glanced toward the waiting staff. There are approximately 40 people staring at me. 43. She shot him a look. That is not helpful. Perhaps not. The faint smile in his voice softened her nerves slightly. Together they approached the entrance. The household staff bowed respectfully. The butler stepped forward. Welcome home, Your Grace. Home. The word struck unexpectedly. Home was supposed to be familiar, comfortable, certain. Ravenshire Manor was none of those things. Not yet. Nathaniel seemed to notice her hesitation. His voice lowered. One day it will feel like home. She looked at him. You sound remarkably confident. I am. The answer carried no arrogance. Only certainty. Somehow that made it more convincing. The following days settled into a surprisingly gentle routine. Evelyn had expected formality, endless obligations, constant scrutiny. Some of that existed, yet much of her time remained her own. She explored the library, walked through the gardens, learned the names of staff members. Gradually the vast manor became less intimidating. Nathaniel remained busy with estate matters. Meetings, correspondence, financial reports. Responsibilities followed him constantly. Yet despite those demands, small details began capturing Evelyn's attention. The first occurred during breakfast. She entered the dining room expecting to eat alone. Instead, she discovered her preferred tea waiting at her place. Not merely tea. The exact blend she favored. Light, floral, difficult to find outside London. She stared at the cup. Nathaniel glanced up from a document. Something wrong? No. Evelyn sat slowly. How did the kitchen know I prefer this tea? He returned to reading. I told them. The answer seemed simple. Yet it lingered with her all morning. 3 days later, she spent several hours in the library. Rain battered the windows. Wind rattled tree branches outside. By late afternoon, the room had grown chilly. Evelyn rose to request another log for the fireplace. Before she reached the bell pull, a footman entered carrying fresh wood. Your Grace. The young servant smiled politely. His Grace asked that the fire be kept warm in here. Evelyn stared after him once he left. Later that evening, she discovered Nathaniel in his study. You instructed the staff regarding the library. He looked up from a stack of papers. Yes. Why? Because you spend half your day there. The answer emerged as though it required no explanation. You noticed. Nathaniel lowered his pen. Evelyn. Her name sounded warm in his voice. Familiar now. The library is directly beneath my study. She laughed despite herself. That is a fair point. Yet the explanation did not fully satisfy her. Because noticing where she spent time was one thing. Remembering her comfort was another. More examples followed. A riding mare appeared because Nathaniel overheard her mention missing morning rides. Fresh flowers arrived weekly in her sitting room because he once noticed her admiring late-season roses. New books appeared in the library after she casually referenced favorite authors during dinner. None of the gestures were grand. None seemed designed to impress. That was precisely why they mattered. Weeks passed. Autumn deepened. Ravenshire Manor slowly transformed around her. And somewhere along the way, an uncomfortable question began forming inside Evelyn's mind. Why had Nathaniel married her? Not publicly, not politically, personally. The thought returned often, usually during quiet moments, usually when he was not there, because despite everything that had happened, uncertainty remained. Their marriage had emerged from scandal, from circumstance, from public attention. He treated her with kindness, respect, consideration. Yet kindness was not love. Respect was not love. Consideration was not love. One evening she found herself standing alone in the conservatory after dinner. Moonlight filtered through glass panels overhead. Exotic plants filled the space with fragrance. The room felt peaceful, until a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. You disappear whenever you are troubled. Evelyn turned. Nathaniel stood near the doorway. Jacket removed. Sleeves rolled slightly. Less Duke. More man. The sight affected her more than it should have. I did not realize I was troubled. He approached slowly. You have spent 20 minutes staring at the same flower. She looked down. He was correct. Perhaps I find it fascinating. It is a fern. The deadpan response made her laugh. Nathaniel smiled faintly. Then his expression softened. What is wrong? Evelyn hesitated. Part of her wanted to avoid the conversation. Another part was tired of avoiding it. May I ask you something? Always. The answer arrived instantly. That alone made her heart ache. Why did you choose me? Silence settled between them. Nathaniel did not look surprised. Almost as though he had expected the question eventually. That is what has been troubling you. Yes. He studied her quietly. You believe I married you because of circumstance. She looked away. Would that be unreasonable? No. His honesty startled her. It would not. The conservatory grew very still. The scandal accelerated events. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. I will not pretend otherwise. Evelyn nodded. Somehow hearing it aloud hurt more than she expected. Then he continued. But it did not create my interest in you. Her breath caught. Slowly she looked back at him. Nathaniel's gaze never wavered. Do you remember our first conversation? In your study. Yes. A faint smile touched his mouth. You were the only person who entered that room without asking me for something. Evelyn blinked. I was asking for discretion. For your sister. He stepped closer. Not yourself. She remembered. The conversation. The questions. The strange feeling of being seen. Most people approach me because of what I can provide. Nathaniel's voice softened. You approached me because someone else needed help. The conservatory seemed smaller suddenly. More intimate. That is not a reason to marry someone. No. Another step. It is a reason to pay attention. Neither spoke for several moments. Then Nathaniel smiled slightly. After that, you became difficult to ignore. Heat rose to her cheeks. That sounds suspiciously like a compliment. It is. The admission came without hesitation. Evelyn laughed softly. Yet uncertainty remained. He seemed to recognize it. You still doubt me. I am trying not to. Nathaniel considered that. Then he nodded once. Fair enough. To her surprise, he did not press further. Did not demand trust. Did not offer dramatic declarations. Instead, he simply stood beside her beneath the moonlit glass ceiling. Present. Steady. Patient. Somehow that affected her more than any speech could have. Several days later, another incident reinforced what she had begun noticing. During afternoon tea, a young maid accidentally dropped a tray in the corridor outside the drawing room. Porcelain shattered. Tea spilled across the floor. The poor girl looked terrified. Evelyn expected reprimands, apologies, embarrassment. Instead, Nathaniel immediately knelt beside the mess. Are you injured? The maid blinked in confusion. No, Your Grace. Good. He helped gather broken pieces. Then instructed another servant to bring towels. No anger. No irritation. No display. The entire event lasted less than 3 minutes. Yet afterward Evelyn could not stop thinking about it. Because powerful men often revealed themselves through small moments. And Nathaniel continually revealed kindness when nobody expected it. That evening she sat beside the library fire reading while rain tapped softly against the windows. A knock sounded. The butler entered carrying a silver tray. A letter for Your Grace. Evelyn accepted it automatically. Then froze. The handwriting looked familiar. Very familiar. Elegant loops. Careful slant. Her stomach tightened. Celeste. Slowly she broke the seal. The letter contained only a few lines. Dear Evelyn, I hope married life agrees with you. There are matters I wish to discuss. Important matters. I shall arrive at Ravenshire Manor next week. I pray you will receive me kindly. Your loving sister, Celeste. Evelyn lowered the page. Unease settled immediately. Something about the letter felt wrong. Not hostile. Not affectionate either. Purposeful. As though another conversation waited beneath the written words. Outside, thunder rolled across distant hills. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Evelyn stared at the signature. Then toward the window. For weeks she had been slowly finding peace. Slowly building trust. Slowly allowing herself to believe happiness might actually be possible. Now her sister was coming to Ravenshire Manor. And deep in her heart, Evelyn could not shake the feeling that the arrival would change everything once again. The first snowfall of the season arrived on the same morning as Celeste. Thin white flakes drifted across the grounds of Ravenshire Manor, settling gently upon hedges and stone pathways. The landscape looked peaceful, almost innocent. Evelyn stood beside the drawing-room window watching the snowfall when a carriage appeared at the end of the drive. Her stomach tightened immediately. She already knew who had arrived. A moment later the front doors opened. Voices echoed faintly through the entrance hall. Then footsteps approached. Celeste entered the drawing room wearing a dark blue traveling cloak dusted with snow. For a brief second she looked exactly as she always had. Beautiful. Elegant. Familiar. Then Evelyn noticed the strain beneath the appearance. The exhaustion. The uncertainty. Evelyn. Her sister smiled. It has been too long. Evelyn crossed the room and embraced her. The gesture felt natural. Yet something remained different between them now. something neither woman knew how to repair. You must be freezing. Only slightly. Celeste laughed softly. I believe winter arrived specifically to make my journey unpleasant. The familiar humor eased some of Evelyn's tension. For the next hour they spoke quietly beside the fire. Family news, London gossip, minor events that required no emotional risk. Yet throughout the conversation Evelyn sensed an undercurrent beneath every word. Celeste had not traveled all this way for casual conversation. Eventually the topic shifted. It was inevitable. Married life suits you. Celeste stirred her tea without looking up. You seem happy. Evelyn hesitated. I am. The admission felt surprisingly easy. Celeste smiled faintly. I thought so. Silence followed. Then her sister finally asked the question that had been waiting all afternoon. Do you love him? Evelyn looked down at her cup. A few months earlier the answer would have terrified her. Now it simply felt true. Yes. Celeste closed her eyes briefly. The reaction lasted less than a second. Yet it was enough. I am glad. The words sounded sincere. They also sounded painful. Before Evelyn could respond, the drawing room doors opened. Nathaniel entered. The atmosphere changed immediately. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Yet Evelyn felt it. So did Celeste. The Duke greeted both women politely. Miss Hartwell. Your Grace. Celeste rose smoothly. The old confidence returned almost instantly. Thank you for receiving me. Nathaniel inclined his head. You are welcome at Ravenshire Manor. The exchange remained perfectly proper. Perfectly distant. Evelyn noticed the disappointment hidden behind Celeste's smile. Her sister had spent years receiving effortless admiration from nearly every man she encountered. Nathaniel offered respect. Nothing more. The difference unsettled her. Over the following days Celeste settled into life at the manor. At first everything appeared pleasant enough. She accompanied Evelyn on walks, joined meals, participated in evening conversations. Yet gradually small details began troubling Evelyn. Not because Celeste behaved badly. Quite the opposite. She behaved perfectly. Too perfectly. She laughed at Nathaniel's observations. Asked thoughtful questions about estate matters. Found reasons to remain near him during meals. None of it crossed any line. Yet the pattern became impossible to ignore. One afternoon Evelyn entered the library unexpectedly and stopped in the doorway. Nathaniel stood near a table reviewing correspondence. Celeste occupied the chair opposite him. Both looked up as she entered. Nothing appeared improper. Nothing actually was. Yet an uncomfortable feeling settled in Evelyn's chest anyway. Am I interrupting? She asked. Not at all. Nathaniel immediately set aside the documents. We were discussing a charity committee in London. Celeste smiled. Your husband has very strong opinions regarding inefficient bookkeeping. Nathaniel looked unimpressed. Mismanagement annoys me. It fascinates me. Celeste laughed. The sound echoed through the room. Bright, charming, familiar. Evelyn smiled politely and joined them. Yet throughout the conversation she remained strangely aware of something she had never noticed before. Celeste was trying very hard. The realization bothered her more than she expected. Later that evening she sat alone in her sitting room struggling to understand why. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Nathaniel entered moments later carrying a book. I found the novel you were looking for. He placed it beside her chair. Evelyn stared at it. You remembered? Of course. The answer arrived automatically. Then he paused. Something is wrong. She sighed softly. Am I becoming that predictable? Only to me. The quiet remark warmed her despite herself. Nathaniel took the chair opposite her. What is troubling you? Evelyn considered several possible responses. None felt comfortable. Finally she chose honesty. Celeste. Understanding flickered across his expression immediately. I see. Do you? Perhaps. He remained silent for a moment. You believe she is unhappy. She is. Evelyn folded her hands together. I just do not know why. Nathaniel looked toward the fire. His expression became thoughtful. Sometimes people spend so long pursuing a specific future that they struggle when it disappears. The observation felt dangerously accurate. You think that is what happened? Possibly. He met her gaze again. I think your sister expected her life to unfold differently. Evelyn nodded slowly. The answer made sense. Yet somehow it did not explain everything. The following afternoon, her unease deepened. Snow continued falling outside. Most of the household remained indoors. Evelyn spent several hours reviewing correspondence before deciding to search for a missing book. The library seemed the obvious place to begin. As she approached the partially open door, voices drifted into the hallway. She immediately recognized them. Celeste, Nathaniel. Evelyn stopped. Not intentionally. The conversation simply reached her before she could announce herself. You have been very kind. Celeste's voice sounded softer than usual. More kind than I deserved. Nathaniel answered politely. There is nothing to forgive. Pause followed. Then Celeste spoke again. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if circumstances had been different? Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Silence stretched inside the room. Finally, Nathaniel replied. No. The answer came without hesitation, without uncertainty, without ambiguity. Celeste laughed lightly. That was remarkably direct. You asked a direct question. Another pause. Then her sister tried again. Not even occasionally? No. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. I am satisfied with the way events unfolded. The words landed like a bell ringing through still air. Evelyn stood frozen outside the door. Not because of Celeste. Because of him. Satisfied. Not resigned. Not accepting. Satisfied. The distinction mattered. A great deal. Inside the room, Celeste became very quiet. When she spoke again, sadness colored every word. You chose correctly. Nathaniel's answer followed immediately. Yes. The certainty in that single word left no room for misunderstanding. None whatsoever. Evelyn quietly stepped away before either person noticed her presence. She retreated down the corridor with her heart pounding. Relief flooded through her. Relief so intense it almost embarrassed her. She had not realized how much doubt she still carried until that moment. Not doubt about Nathaniel's character. Doubt about his feelings. About his reasons. About whether she had merely benefited from circumstance. Now some of that uncertainty finally began to disappear. Unfortunately, the same conversation seemed to affect Celeste very differently. Over the next 2 days, her sister became increasingly withdrawn. She smiled less, spoke less, frequently stared out windows without explanation. Then, on the third evening, everything changed. The household gathered for dinner as usual. Snow fell heavily outside. Firelight flickered across crystal glasses and polished silver. Conversation remained pleasant. Until a servant entered carrying a letter. For His Grace. Nathaniel accepted the envelope. The moment he saw the seal, his expression changed. Evelyn recognized it instantly. The look he wore whenever new information appeared. He opened the letter. Read silently. Then read it again. Nathaniel, Evelyn asked quietly. The Duke looked up. His gray eyes had hardened. My investigators found something. The room grew still. Celeste's hand tightened around her wineglass. Nathaniel noticed. So did Evelyn. What kind of something? She asked. Nathaniel folded the letter carefully. Evidence. The single word seemed to drain all color from Celeste's face. A long silence followed. Then Nathaniel rose from his chair. I believe the truth is finally beginning to emerge. Outside, snow continued falling across Ravenshire Manor. Inside, years of assumptions had begun cracking apart. And for the first time since the scandal started, Evelyn suspected the answers they had been seeking were much closer than anyone realized. The invitation arrived 3 days later. Thick cream parchment, gold lettering, the crest of the Ashcombe family pressed into dark blue wax. By itself, the invitation would have meant very little. Combined with Nathaniel's newly discovered evidence, it felt significant. Evelyn stood beside the breakfast table reading it while snow drifted lazily beyond the windows. A winter ball? She asked. Nathaniel accepted the card from her. Hosted by Lady Veronica Ashcombe. The same Lady Veronica who attempted to embarrass me at Lady Whitmore's gala. The very one. Evelyn sighed. How fortunate. Nathaniel's mouth twitched slightly. You continue to possess a remarkable gift for understatement. The invitation had not been addressed only to them. Nearly every influential family in London would attend. More importantly, so would Lord Alistair Vane. Nathaniel had already confirmed it. The discovery explained his interest immediately. You believe something will happen there. Nathaniel folded the card and set it aside. I believe someone who feels secure often becomes careless. And Lord Vane feels secure? At the moment. His expression hardened slightly. Yes. The ball took place 4 evenings later. London glittered beneath fresh snowfall. Carriages lined the streets. Gas lamps reflected across icy cobblestones. Inside Ashcombe House, hundreds of candles illuminated enormous crystal chandeliers. Music echoed through the ballroom. Laughter floated above conversations. Society had gathered once again. Yet this evening felt different from previous events. Evelyn sensed it the moment she entered. The atmosphere carried anticipation, expectation, as though everyone instinctively knew another chapter of the story was about to unfold. Nathaniel offered his arm as they entered together. The gesture no longer surprised her. Yet the effect remained powerful. Heads turned immediately. Whispers followed. Not cruel whispers this time. Curious ones. Respectful ones. The transformation still felt surreal. Several months earlier most guests would have looked directly past her. Now they stepped aside, smiled, requested introductions. This is becoming alarming. Evelyn kept her voice low. Nathaniel glanced toward her. What is? People are being pleasant. That earned an actual laugh. Rare enough to feel like a victory. You are adjusting remarkably well to public admiration. I am enduring it. A subtle distinction. Before she could answer, Lady Veronica Ashcombe appeared. Her welcome was gracious, impeccable, perfectly polished. Yet something about her smile seemed strained, as though she sensed events moving beyond her control. Your Grace, Duchess. Evelyn still felt startled whenever people addressed her by title. Lady Veronica's attention lingered on her slightly longer than necessary. Then she moved on. The evening progressed. Conversations flowed. Music played. Guests danced. Nathaniel remained observant throughout. More than once Evelyn caught him studying the crowd rather than participating in it. Looking, waiting, searching. Eventually she noticed who occupied most of his attention. Lord Alistair Vane. The man moved comfortably through the ballroom. Charming, confident, entirely at ease. He laughed easily, accepted compliments, spoke with influential guests. Anyone observing casually would see nothing suspicious. Nathaniel observed differently. You are watching him. Evelyn joined him near a marble column overlooking the dance floor. Yes. Why? Nathaniel's gaze never left Lord Vane. Because he is expecting something tonight. How do you know? He keeps checking the entrance. Evelyn looked more carefully. The Duke was right. Every few minutes Lord Vane's attention drifted toward the ballroom doors. Anticipation. Expectation. Waiting. For whom? She asked quietly. Before Nathaniel could answer, a new arrival entered the room. The effect was immediate. Conversations faltered. Several guests exchanged surprised looks. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. Celeste. Her sister stood near the entrance wearing silver silk and an uncertain smile. She looked beautiful, yet she also looked nervous, deeply nervous. Nathaniel's expression darkened immediately. Lord Vane's reaction proved even more revealing. The moment he saw Celeste, satisfaction flashed across his face. Gone almost instantly, not fast enough. Nathaniel saw it. So did Evelyn. She wasn't supposed to come. Evelyn turned toward him. You know that? Yes. The answer arrived sharply. I specifically advised against it. Unease settled heavily inside her chest. Across the ballroom, Celeste had already spotted them. For a brief moment their eyes met. Evelyn saw something there she had never seen before. Fear. Genuine fear. Then the moment vanished. Celeste forced a smile and moved deeper into the crowd. The evening deteriorated quickly after that. Within an hour, whispers had begun spreading. Fresh rumors, new accusations, old suspicions revived. Someone had apparently informed several guests that the original scandal involved more than society realized. That the Duke had been manipulated. That Evelyn had encouraged the marriage. That the wrong sister had ultimately benefited. The lies spread with alarming speed. This is deliberate. Evelyn stood beside Nathaniel near the edge of the ballroom. Yes. His voice had gone cold. It is. Guests were beginning to stare again. Not with admiration. With curiosity. Speculation. Judgment. The familiar sting returned. Evelyn had not missed it. Someone planned this. Nathaniel nodded once. Exactly. Then a footman approached carrying a sealed packet. The servant handed it directly to the Duke. This arrived for your grace. Nathaniel accepted it. Broke the seal. Read silently. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he looked up. His eyes had changed. The waiting was over. What is it? Evelyn asked. Nathaniel handed her the top page. Her breath caught instantly. Letters. Copies of letters. Several written by Lord Alastair Vane. Several written by hired intermediaries. Payments. Instructions. Names. Dates. More importantly, proof. Proof that anonymous reports had been submitted to newspapers before the scandal occurred. Proof that false witnesses had been encouraged to spread specific stories. Proof that rumors had been cultivated deliberately. Evelyn looked up. You found it. Yes. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. Too calm. All of it. Nearby guests continued whispering, completely unaware that the truth now rested in his hands. The Duke folded the documents carefully, then looked across the ballroom, directly at Lord Vane. The man was still smiling, still confident, still unaware. It is time. Nathaniel offered Evelyn his arm. She stared at him. Time for what? His answer arrived quietly. Certainly. To end this. Together they crossed the ballroom. Conversations faded as people noticed their movement. One by one guests turned toward them. Music slowed, then stopped entirely. Even the orchestra seemed to sense something unusual unfolding. Lord Vane finally noticed their approach. His smile remained intact. First, Your Grace. He inclined his head politely. Duchess. Nathaniel stopped directly before him. Good evening, Lord Vane. The surrounding crowd grew larger by the second. Everyone wanted to hear. Nobody wanted to appear obvious about it. Society excelled at pretending. Nathaniel did not. There appears to be considerable confusion regarding recent events. Lord Vane laughed lightly. Society thrives on confusion. True. Nathaniel reached into his coat and withdrew the documents. Fortunately, facts are often more useful. Silence spread rapidly. Lord Vane's smile weakened. Only slightly. Nathaniel continued. Several months ago someone arranged for false reports concerning my interactions with the Hartwell family. The ballroom had become completely silent now. Guests openly stared. Anonymous letters were submitted. Nathaniel held up one of the pages. Witnesses were coached. Rumors were encouraged. Lord Vane's complexion began changing. Gradually. Noticeably. Your Grace. His voice sounded strained. Surely this is not the place. On the contrary. Nathaniel's tone sharpened. It is the perfect place. The crowd pressed closer. Evelyn spotted Lady Veronica standing frozen beside a marble pillar. Lord Malcolm and Lady Beatrice had arrived earlier and now looked utterly bewildered. Celeste stood near the edge of the gathering. Pale. Motionless. Nathaniel continued. Because these lies were created publicly. His gray eyes never left Lord Vane. They deserved to die publicly as well. The silence became absolute. Then Nathaniel revealed the letters. One by one. Dates. Instructions. Payments. Names. Evidence. Each piece struck harder than the last. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Faces shifted from curiosity to shock. Lord Vane attempted several interruptions. Nathaniel ignored every one of them. The truth kept coming. Relentless. Precise. Unavoidable. Finally the Duke held up the last document. This letter confirms the entire scheme. He looked around the room. The scandal was manufactured. Guests stared openly now. Nobody bothered pretending otherwise. Nathaniel's voice carried clearly through the ballroom. My marriage was never the result of impropriety. He paused. It was the result of choice. Then he looked directly at Evelyn. In front of everyone. My choice. Emotion tightened her throat. Around them, the ballroom remained silent. Watching. Listening. Understanding. The tide had turned. Yet one question still remained unanswered. The most painful question of all. Because as the crowd processed Lord Vane's role in the deception, more than one guest had already begun looking towards Celeste. And for the first time, Evelyn realized the next truth revealed might be far more devastating than the first. For several seconds after Nathaniel finished speaking, nobody moved. The ballroom stood suspended in stunned silence. Hundreds of guests stared at the documents in his hands. At Lord Alistair Vane. At Evelyn. At each other. The atmosphere had shifted completely. The rumors that had dominated months of conversation were collapsing in real time. Lord Vane attempted to recover first. His smile returned. Weakly. This proves nothing. The statement sounded far less convincing than he intended. Nathaniel remained calm. It proves quite a lot. Anonymous letters could come from anyone. True. Nathaniel nodded once. Which is why I obtained testimony from the men you paid to distribute them. A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Lord Vane's face lost what little color remained. You cannot possibly. I can. Nathaniel's voice remained steady. And I did. The silence deepened. Lord Vane looked around the room searching for support. None appeared. People who had eagerly entertained gossip now seemed desperate to distance themselves from it. Society loved a scandal. It loved being associated with a failed scandal considerably less. Lady Veronica Ashcombe finally spoke. Alistair. Her voice trembled slightly. Tell me this is not true. Lord Vane opened his mouth, closed it, then looked away. The answer proved more powerful than any denial. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. The truth was no longer hiding. It stood in plain view. Yet Nathaniel was not finished. He folded the documents carefully and handed them to a waiting servant. Then his attention shifted, slowly, deliberately, toward Celeste. Evelyn felt her heartbeat quicken. Around them, several guests followed his gaze. The tension returned immediately. Different now. Sharper. More personal. Celeste stood near a marble column. Pale. Motionless. For one brief moment Evelyn wanted to protect her. To step between her sister and the attention gathering around her. Old habits died slowly. Nathaniel spoke before she could move. Miss Hartwell. Celeste looked up. Her expression carried quiet resignation. Almost relief. Your Grace. The ballroom remained silent. Watching. Waiting. There is one question I have never been able to answer. Nathaniel's voice softened slightly. Why you never seemed surprised by any of this. A collective breath moved through the crowd. Celeste closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. Because I knew Alistair intended to spread rumors. Murmurs exploded throughout the room. Evelyn stared. She had prepared herself for many possibilities. Not that. Celeste continued before anyone could interrupt. I did not know the full extent of his plans. Her voice shook. But I knew enough. The confession struck the ballroom like lightning. Lady Beatrice looked horrified. Lord Malcolm appeared unable to speak. Evelyn felt the world tilt slightly beneath her feet. Nathaniel remained still. You knew. Celeste nodded slowly. Tears glistened in her eyes. He convinced me it would force your attention. She laughed bitterly. I was foolish enough to believe him. No one spoke. Alistair told me that if society connected my name to yours, everything else would follow. She looked toward Nathaniel. I believed he meant marriage. Lord Vane finally found his voice. Celeste. Do not. Her head snapped toward him. For the first time all evening genuine anger entered her expression. Do not pretend you cared about me. The ballroom fell silent again. Celeste's composure cracked completely. Years of confidence. Years of charm. Years of certainty. Gone. You cared about Ravenshire. Her voice trembled. About power. About influence. About proximity to a duke. Lord Vane looked away. The gesture answered every remaining question. Evelyn felt her heart ache. Not because Celeste was innocent. She was not. But because she suddenly understood the truth. Her sister had not orchestrated the scandal. She had allowed herself to be manipulated by someone who understood her weaknesses. Admiration, tension, validation, things she had always received easily, things she could not imagine losing. Nathaniel's expression softened slightly. "Why did you never tell anyone?" Celeste laughed through tears. "Because every day it became worse." She looked toward Evelyn. "And every day you suffered for my mistakes." The words landed heavily between them. "I kept thinking I could fix it." Her voice broke. "Then you married him." She looked at Nathaniel. "And I realized it was too late." Silence settled once more. This time it felt different. Not accusatory. Sad. Human. Lady Beatrice suddenly rose from her chair. "This is unbelievable." Her voice rang through the ballroom. "Everything that happened. Everything our family endured." She turned toward Evelyn. "If only you had done more." The accusation emerged automatically. Instinctively. The same pattern she had followed for years. The same pattern everyone knew. Everyone except Lady Beatrice. The room went still. Evelyn felt the familiar sting. Even now. Even after everything. Before she could respond, Nathaniel stepped forward. Just one step. It was enough. His voice remained calm. "No." The single word cut through the ballroom. Lady Beatrice blinked. "Your Grace." Evelyn did more than anyone. His gaze never left hers. She protected her sister. Another pause. She protected her family. Another. She protected people who repeatedly failed to protect her. Silence followed. Absolute silence. Nathaniel turned toward the crowd. "The only person in this entire situation who behaved with consistent dignity was my wife." Every guest heard him. Every guest understood exactly what he meant. Lady Beatrice lowered her eyes. Lord Malcolm looked ashamed. Celeste openly wept. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn experienced something she had never expected. Public validation. Not whispered praise. Not private reassurance. Public recognition. The sort that could not be ignored. The sort that changed how people looked at you forever. Moments later the evening began unraveling. Guests departed quietly. Conversations became subdued. Lord Vane left under a cloud of humiliation and isolation. No one attempted to stop him. No one attempted to defend him. The scandal belonged to him now. Not Evelyn. Not Nathaniel. Not even Celeste. Eventually the ballroom emptied. Snow fell steadily outside. Carriages disappeared into the London night. Hours later, after returning to Ravenshire House, Evelyn found herself unable to sleep. The events of the evening replayed endlessly through her thoughts. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and wandered into the winter garden. Moonlight reflected across fresh snow beyond the glass walls. The manor slept quietly around her. "I thought I might find you here." Nathaniel's voice drifted through the darkness. Evelyn turned. He approached slowly. No title. No audience. No expectations. Just Nathaniel. "I could not sleep." "Neither could I." They stood together beneath the glass ceiling. Snowflakes drifted silently outside. For a while neither spoke. Then Evelyn laughed softly. "Everything feels different." "It is. People know the truth now." Nathaniel looked at her. "They should have known it long ago." Emotion tightened her throat unexpectedly. "You did not have to defend me tonight." "Yes." His answer arrived instantly. "I did." She looked away. "Why?" The question emerged more vulnerable than she intended. Nathaniel studied her for several seconds. Then, to her complete astonishment, he lowered himself onto one knee. Evelyn stared. Speech vanished entirely. "Nathaniel, let me finish." His voice carried quiet warmth. "Months ago I married a woman I admired." The winter garden seemed to stop breathing. "A woman whose strength impressed me." His gaze never left hers. "A woman whose kindness challenged me." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Nathaniel smiled slightly. I thought admiration would be enough. The confession settled gently between them. I was wrong. Her heartbeat thundered. Nathaniel, I love you. The words arrived simply, honestly, without performance, without drama. And now that every obligation, every scandal, and every misunderstanding has finally been stripped away, he took her hand carefully. I would like the chance to know whether you might someday choose me for reasons that have nothing to do with circumstance. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She laughed through them. You are asking your own wife to choose you? It seems only fair. The answer made her laugh again. Nathaniel's smile deepened, warm, hopeful, entirely real, and standing beneath moonlight and glass, with winter surrounding them and the past finally behind them, Evelyn realized that the greatest gift he had ever given her was not a title, not protection, not even public validation. It was the freedom to choose her future for herself. And for the first time, she knew exactly what she wanted. Spring arrived quietly at Ravenshire Manor. Snow melted from stone pathways. Rose bushes awakened beneath pale sunlight. The fields surrounding the estate shifted from winter gray to soft green. Life moved forward as though determined to prove that even the longest season eventually ended. Evelyn stood beside an open window in the west drawing room and watched gardeners preparing flower beds below. The morning air carried the scent of fresh earth and new growth. Somewhere in the distance, birds sang from the oak trees lining the drive. 6 months earlier, she would never have imagined feeling so peaceful. A knock sounded behind her. Your Grace. The butler entered carrying a stack of correspondence. Several invitations have arrived. Evelyn smiled. Let me guess. More charity committees. 3 charity committees. The butler nodded gravely. And 2 social events. I miss the days when nobody invited me anywhere. The older man almost smiled. I do not believe those days will be returning. After he departed, Evelyn carried the letters to the library. The room had become one of her favorite places in the manor. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. A fire burned gently despite the mild weather. Nathaniel sat behind a desk reviewing estate reports. He glanced up the moment she entered. He somehow always noticed her. You look suspiciously cheerful. Evelyn set the invitations down beside him. Spring is improving my disposition. Good. Nathaniel signed another document. Winter was beginning to concern me. She moved around the desk and leaned against its edge. You survived perfectly well. I survived because you kept rearranging flowers in every room. The observation made her laugh. Nathaniel finally set aside his pen. Then he reached for her hand. A simple habit now. Familiar. Natural. Something that still warmed her every single time. What are those? He nodded toward the invitations. Evidence that society has forgiven us. Nathaniel looked unimpressed. Society requires forgiveness? Apparently. She handed him the top envelope. He scanned it briefly. The Langley Garden Gala. We have been invited as honored guests. Nathaniel sighed. That sounds exhausting. You are a duke. I am aware. His expression remained perfectly serious. It continues to be inconvenient. Evelyn laughed again. Moments like these still surprised her. The world saw Nathaniel Blackthorne as powerful, reserved, untouchable. Very few people saw his dry humor. Fewer still earned it. Later that afternoon, a carriage arrived unexpectedly. The visitor was announced before entering the drawing room. Miss Celeste Hartwell. Evelyn rose immediately. Several months had passed since the winter ball. Several months since the truth emerged. Several months since everything changed. Celeste looked different now. Not dramatically, subtly. The restless need for approval that once defined her seemed quieter, softer, more honest. She smiled as she entered. This time the smile reached her eyes. I hope I am not intruding. Never. Evelyn crossed the room and embraced her. The gesture felt easy now, natural. Time had repaired what bitterness could not. They spent the afternoon walking through the gardens. Rose bushes bloomed around stone paths. Bees drifted lazily through the sunlight. For a while they spoke of ordinary things. Books, travel, family news. Eventually the conversation found its way somewhere deeper. I have been thinking a great deal lately. Celeste paused beside a fountain. That sounds dangerous. The familiar joke earned a laugh. Then Celeste grew serious again. I spent years believing attention was the same thing as love. Evelyn remained quiet. It took losing both to understand the difference. Sunlight reflected across the water. The breeze stirred nearby flowers. I am sorry. The words emerged softly. For all of it. Evelyn looked at her sister. The apology carried no excuses. No explanations. Only sincerity. I know. Celeste's eyes filled with emotion. You should have hated me. Perhaps. Evelyn smiled gently. But I was always very bad at that. A tear slipped down her sister's cheek. She laughed and brushed it away. You really are impossible. Nathaniel says the same thing. Then perhaps he is finally learning something. By evening the sisters returned to the manor laughing together. The sound surprised several servants. It surprised Evelyn too, because for the first time in many years, there was no competition between them. No comparisons. No shadows. Just two women trying to become better than they had been yesterday. A week later London hosted its largest spring charity gala. The event drew nobility from across the country. Ballrooms glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Music echoed through enormous halls. The entire city seemed determined to celebrate the season. As Nathaniel and Evelyn entered the ballroom together, conversations paused. Not from scandal. Not from curiosity. From respect. The difference felt extraordinary. Guests approached warmly, smiled genuinely, requested introductions. The same society that once ignored Evelyn now welcomed her openly. Yet the most satisfying part had nothing to do with status. It was the absence of resentment. She no longer needed their approval, which made receiving it strangely unimportant. During the evening, Lady Veronica Ashcombe approached. Evelyn had not spoken to her since the winter ball. The woman looked slightly uncomfortable. Your Grace. Lady Veronica. An awkward pause followed. Then the older woman cleared her throat. I owe you an apology. Evelyn blinked. That seems to be becoming a trend. Lady Veronica laughed despite herself. I misjudged you. Many people did. That is not an excuse. The honesty surprised her. No. Evelyn smiled gently. It is not. The woman visibly relaxed. The conversation moved on. Another small wound healed. Another burden released. Much later, after the final dance and final farewell, Nathaniel escorted Evelyn outside. The evening air felt warm. Lanterns glowed along the garden paths surrounding the ballroom. Music drifted faintly from open windows. For a few moments they walked without speaking. Then Nathaniel stopped beside a stone fountain. Do you remember Lady Whitmore's gala? Evelyn laughed softly. The evening you forced half of London to stare at me? Forced is a strong word. It is an accurate word. Nathaniel accepted that with surprising grace. Fair enough. The fountain splashed quietly beside them. Lantern light reflected across the water. I was terrified that night. Evelyn looked toward the stars. I know. How? Nathaniel's expression softened. Because your hand shook when I asked you to dance. The memory made her smile. And yet you asked anyway. Yes. His answer came easily. Because I wanted everyone to see what they had missed. Emotion tightened her throat unexpectedly. Even now, after everything, Nathaniel reached for her hand. Evelyn. She looked up. Yes. The warmth in his eyes stole her breath just as surely as it had months ago. Perhaps more. There is something I have been meaning to tell you. Only one thing? At the moment. She laughed softly. Nathaniel stepped closer. When I first met you, I thought you were extraordinary. Her heartbeat quickened. You have mentioned that. I was wrong. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. That is not the direction I expected this conversation to take. The corner of his mouth lifted. Allow me to finish. She nodded. You were not extraordinary. His gaze never left hers. You were essential. The world seemed to grow very quiet. Essential to what? She whispered. Nathaniel smiled. The smile she saw only when they were alone. The one that belonged to no duke. No title. No obligation. Only him. To my life. Tears filled her eyes immediately. She laughed at herself even as they appeared. Nathaniel brushed one away gently. There it is. What? That expression. The same words he had spoken months ago. In a library. Before either of them understood where the journey would lead. Evelyn shook her head, smiling through tears. You noticed that too? I notice everything about you. The answer held no hesitation. No doubt. No audience. Just truth. Then he kissed her forehead gently and rested his hand against hers. Together they stood beneath the spring stars while music drifted through the night behind them. The overlooked daughter who had spent years living in someone else's shadow was invisible no longer. Not because society finally recognized her worth. Not because she became a duchess. Not because the world changed its mind. She was no longer invisible because someone had truly seen her from the very beginning. And in choosing her openly, publicly, and without apology, Nathaniel Blackthorne had given her something far greater than a title. He had given her a home, not a manor, not an estate, not a house built of stone and history, a home built of trust, respect, laughter, forgiveness, and love. And standing beside him beneath the stars, with spring blooming around them and the future stretching endlessly ahead, Evelyn finally understood something she had searched for her entire life. The greatest victory was never being chosen over someone else. It was being chosen for exactly who you were.